How does the work on those home renovation shows hold up after the show is done? Plumbing and remodeling company I work for did plumbing for an HGTV show about 10 years ago. We did the hookups for the new laundry room. The homeowners picked some fancy Moroccan tile for the floors at some upscale New York City boutique, and the host of the show decided it would look better without grout, which went about as well as you'd expect. Filming wrapped up, and we were called back out a few weeks later to replace the fancy tiles that immediately chipped and became dangerous with some boring tile. Had to sign NDAs and stuff like that. So, my sister's master bedroom got a makeover on a Surprise Your Spouse show. The designer was going for an Arabian Nights romantic vibe, but it ended up pretty weird looking with all the closets hidden behind yards of draped fabric. They took it all down and repainted the room a neutral color within months. They also took the ceiling fan out and replaced it with a giant tree branch wired up with twinkling lights. Not too long afterwards, half the lights went out and it was too hot in the room without the fan, so they put that back as well. On the bright side, it didn't cost them anything, and it was a fun experience, and they got a couple of new furniture pieces out of it, but in the end, they didn't keep any of it the same. I know it's not a house, but a local place was on bar rescue a few years back. Overhauled the entire interior. I haven't seen the episode of the actual show, but the bar has softball fields at it. I went up and played softball during one of their test runs. They renamed the place Boulder Lodge. About 9 months later, they went back to the old name, but kept most of the interior designs and the food and menu. It's still running and largely seems better than it was before the rescue. My family was on a home renovation show when I was a kid. It was in the late 90s or early 2000s. I think it was Changing Rooms or possibly another show by the same cast and producers. It was one of those shows where they do 3 rooms in the house, and mine was one of the rooms they decorated. It looked so pretty. They decorated it to look like a huge fairy woodland with huge tree murals on the walls and a night sky of stars hanging from the ceiling, but it held up really badly. All of the murals on the wall peeled off and it looked pretty bad pretty quick. I had fun shooting the show though, and it was a cool story to tell my friends at school. Yeah, I remember thinking as a kid how magical some of these transformations of kids' rooms looked, and wondering why my parents wouldn't help me redecorate like that. Of course, as an adult with some trade work behind me, I look at it happening and I wonder why these industry professionals are putting in all of these super temporary fixings and just seeming to expect it to stand the test of time. Friends were on a show a few years ago. It was a super intense 3 weeks of filming, and the redesign looked great on camera. In reality, it was literally things stuck together with staples and tape. After the show, my friend took 2 weeks off work to rebuild everything properly. My grandpa has an awesome wood workbench made for the Woodwrights Shop, a PBS show. I think it'll probably be around for my cousin's grandkids with how solid it is. You remember the show Extreme Makeover, a show where they build or hugely remake a home for a needy person or owner? They did one here in my town, I won't say which town for privacy, and my brother, a builder, was approached to help build a home in the dead of winter. My brother couldn't help, but our friends, the neighbors to the home, volunteered, and the home was completed in 1 week. In heavy rain and cold, they built it, and now the home has any number of problems too. The owner went back on Extreme Makeover to fix everything and was told, "You got this for free, fix it yourself." I just passed that home last week, and judging by how pretty it is, I'm sure their taxes went through the roof. I also read that Extreme Makeover also writes into the deal that families can't sell for a few years and that some homes get caught up in divorce settlements. I helped source a person for such a show after they were the victim of a rogue trader that took tens of thousands of pounds from them, leaving them with nothing left and not doing the work. I felt pretty good about myself that I was able to talk the person through what would happen, sit them down and chat over the pros and cons, and find a pathway through so that they could have a habitable home and a normal family life again, especially as the family had had it rough even before the rogue trader. The renovations looked great, and there's no way the family would have been able to have gone ahead without the help and funding from the TV show. The funny thing is, I got a call from the person about 6 months later, and they said that the TV company had been in touch and sent out another builder who redid much of the work and made it even nicer, because they since found out the guy they originally used was a cowboy builder. What I'll always remember though is the transformation in the person. The first time I met them, they were crying, shaking uncontrollably, afraid of the rogue trader, and utterly desperate, with seemingly no way out. Over the course of my dealings with them, they changed to such an extent it was like a different person. They were bubbly, positive, and resilient. They were able to laugh off the issue where they had to have a second builder out, and while they were in talks with the TV people, it actually even led to a freelance job offer for them as well. They'd been at rock bottom, and this was the catalyst that turned it around, and it was totally unexpected for them. I believe it was genuinely life-changing. This was at least 10 years back now, but I'll never forget it. I hope that family's still doing well. I work for one of the construction companies that was contracted to build the new house on Extreme Makeover Home Edition. This was like 10 plus years ago when the show was at the height of its popularity. Anyways, it was a huge, nice house built for a widowed mother with several kids. The father had recently died, hence why she was on the show. Even though the house was given to her, she couldn't afford it after a year or so because of property tax, electricity, water, and upkeep, and she put it on the market. Simply owning a home of that size is very expensive, and she couldn't afford it. The obvious follow-up question here, and I get it all the time, is what are the legalities of selling that house, especially that quickly? Does she get to keep the money for the sale? And my answer is, I have no idea. Another popular question, did your company have to donate anything to be on the show? Yes, but I have no idea what was donated. I've heard some rumors that labor was donated, and the show paid for the materials, but I have no real confirmation on this. I volunteered on a site that was renovated by the show School Pride, which lasted one season. The show went into a rundown public school and renovated some of their spaces. Noble work, but the condition of the schools was shameful. They should never have gotten that way in the first place. For the project I helped with, they bought in a bunch of IKEA furniture for a student lounge. Look, it looked nice, and I'm sure it helped their budget go farther, but I wasn't sure if the stuff they chose would hold up real well to a bunch of high school students using it. I've not been back to know how the school has fared since the renovation. I'd be thrilled to hear that it went well, but any of the students that would have been there when it was new would have graduated by now. These reminds me of the episode, I think it was DIY SOS, where they redid this woman's bedroom and kept referring to it as a boudoir. They did it up like you've seen in the film Moulin Rouge, maybe. Like that kind of setup. This woman absolutely frickin' hated it. Probably one of the few times I've seen someone not just smile and nod at the monstrosity in front of them. I also heard Pimp My Ride was a frickin' scam, basically. All of those LCD TVs and the really expensive stuff they put on those cars, they took them right back out again. Yeah, Pimp My Ride is plagued with issues like that. To name a few, they doctored the stories like putting candy wrappers in fat people's cars and tried to convince a guy to leave his girlfriend to sell the show more. Incredibly long wait times. The show would be within a week, but the actual time was months. Old stock. Stuff like wheels and such were just leftovers they had lying around. The removal of stuff, like you said. I recall the candy floss machine being removed too, as well as game consoles, for safety purposes. Visuals only. There were no actual repairs to the running of vehicles. And the reactions were staged. Many contestants have stated they were told to act more surprised on reveal, and the whole losing your mind when the host is there at your door thing is bullcrap as well. I used to love that show growing up, but even as a teen with barely any car knowledge, I generally found myself asking, why didn't they do anything to make the car run better? At least I was under the impression that the people could use or sell all the TVs and things, but apparently that wasn't even on the table. What a ripoff! Kind of in a similar vein, there was that show Gordon Ramsay does where he renovates hotels on Hotel Hell. One of the early episodes he was in Las Cruces, and I have relatives in nearby El Paso that keep me filled in since I'm a big Ramsay fan. It didn't go over well for the owner following the episode. Anyways, in the episode, the lady is running a unique stay hotel into the ground with mediocre food, nothing at all like local cuisine, and bad singing like Cher that she does in the dining area. I'm not going to fault her for singing badly, but she should have realized this was driving away customers and taken Ramsay's advice. Ramsay stayed for a week, and this was a big deal in Las Cruces, because celebrities usually aren't out in West Texas or New Mexico. His show also paid as compensation for filming a major renovation with new furniture and stuff. After filming, Ramsay and the company went off on their way, and I've also got to mention this lady is disliked already in the city of Las Cruces. As for what happened afterwards, well, a lot of things. The bar down the road did a watch party of the episode when it went live and pulled all of the works with an outdoor projector and a whole big event out of it. Rather than heed his advice, the lady decided to sell off the furniture and stuff that Ramsay provided and go back to the old ways, which meant people stopped coming. She was especially disliked even more after it was found out she did that. She eventually had to sell off the hotel entirely and skipped town. El Paso News interviewed the new manager, who says they've made a lot of changes since that episode, but they're still haunted by it. As for the head chef and cook that Ramsay was talking to about food trucks in the episode, I think that guy eventually either started a taco truck of his own, or he's working for one and is doing well last I heard. At least somebody got a happy ending in all of that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A family member of mine was on a DIY show called Turf Wars. They basically come in and remodel yours and a neighbor's backyard and then have a vote to see who wins the remodel. The show itself was pretty clear-cut. They'd come in and give a bunch of orders, take some candid shots of the work being done, and then just hang around letting the owner and contracting crew do the work. The hosts were pretty friendly but just kinda gave orders. The voting, though, was kind of a joke. They had people from the neighborhood come in and check out the backyards at different times, and one of the yards was inspected in perfect conditions to let the decor shine, while the other was just quickly given a walkthrough. Both of the yards honestly looked great, but the winning house, the neighbor, not being a family member, had been in the neighborhood for quite a few years while my family had recently moved in, so they weren't well known. The problem was the neighbor had a really large centerpiece to their backyard remodel that was a little impractical for the small backyard they had, and there was hardly any covered seating areas. So if the weather wasn't great, and it's not that great, it wasn't a comfortable area to sit around and get baked by the sun or rained on. Less than a year later, the centerpiece was removed and the pond cemented over as it was too much upkeep, and their backyard fell back to just a cement block, while my family still had the whole backyard set up there as it was much more practical. They kept it until they moved out about 3 to 4 years later. I'm not sure if it's still around, but I'd be surprised if it was removed at all. I also stayed in a room that was made over on Hotel Hell. It was poorly done. The paint lines were terrible, and some of it was on the ceiling. The decorations they used seemed just like really cheap stuff from TJ Maxx, not really hotel-quality stuff. They didn't touch the out-of-date bathroom, but they didn't put that part on the show either. The hotel also didn't keep the fancy linens in that room, because I'm sure that it was a pain to wash and keep track of one special set of linens. Basically, it looked great on camera, but in person it didn't look professionally done. I used to watch Trading Spaces back in the day, and I recall people actually crying when they walked in and saw how bad the renovation was. There was one designer who literally glued straw to the walls. I'd love to hear from some of those folks. Another great show to get updates on would be Monster House from way back in the day. They'd always do some crazy stuff like cut a car in half and stick it on the wall, or have some flame-shooting 10-foot-tall T-Rex head in the kitchen, and the renovation would be completed with only 4 seconds left on the clock. Why they were timing it, I have no idea, but it did make it really exciting to watch. My parents, and me as a baby, were on a home renovation show called Makeover Wish. You'd send in a heartfelt story and they'd choose you and come and renovate your house for you and leave it a complete surprise. About 6 or 7 years before I was born, I'm 15 now, one of my mother's kidneys were failing. She was in the hospital constantly and got extremely sick and lost vision in both of her eyes. My dad, being the hero he is, decided to donate one of his kidneys. Although it's not too rare for people to donate kidneys nowadays, back then this was a huge deal and there's been several newspaper articles and news broadcasts about their story. My parents ended up winning the Makeover Wish renovation for our house. The episode is actually on YouTube. Search Makeover Wish the Donor. I have a cameo in it. Apart from the master bedroom, everything is pretty much the same and we've lived here ever since, and I hope we will for years to come. Extreme Makeover came to my town in like 2013 to 14 and did a demolition and new build of a house for my family friends. Luckily, they had the means to keep the house because property taxes went way up. It's still a really nice house and a few people I know have gotten married there. The house has held up super well. Yeah, I guess maybe if you can turn your new unsustainable mansion into a venue or something to try and make a dent in the government's new source of tax revenue, you could make it work. It's a bit shocking that these shows come in and essentially saddle people with massive debt. It always bugs me in these shows where the go-to manufactured drama is, well, we opened up the wall and there's faulty wiring or water damage or termite damage or asbestos and we didn't budget for that, so now you don't get a new master bedroom. And the homeowner responds in some, I can't believe they're trying to sabotage our home fashion. Like, nobody who renovates homes for a living gets to their second renovation, let alone enough to get your own show, without learning to budget for unexpected structural or MEP issues. My countertop company was hired to fix cabinets and countertops for a house after a Property Brothers episode. Like I've seen others comment, the show filmed around all of the problem areas, so on the episode it looked great. The homeowners were livid after the show just picked up and left, and we were stuck dealing with them. Not a fun few weeks. My friend was on Love It or List It. She said that they did great quality work at a fraction of what it would have normally cost. The homeowners in this show have to pay for the renovations. She did say that her family were told to be all dramatic and have little arguments about the renovations to add spice for the show, though. My brother and his roommates were on House Hunters about 4 years ago and loved it. They were the two guys in Waco, Texas that sounded like straight-up country bumpkins, although my brother has since lost that accent. His friend was actually the one buying the house, and my brother was just renting from him, but the producers insisted he be a major part of the show and pretend to have big opinions on the house he wasn't even buying to make it interesting. After a lot of back and forth, he finally honed in, wanting a craftsman-style home, again, still not even the purchaser, and I think the show went on about how he needed this 500 times. Still don't think he even knows what that means. They both got paid a couple of $100 but had to take a week or so off work. Ended up feeling so uncomfortable that they just drank all day and had fun with it. They also recently had their episode on the show where the comedians roast them, which was pretty fun to watch. Oh, and his roommate already owned the house prior to filming, so it was all bullcrap. Restaurant Impossible had a local restaurant and bar on there several years back. Originally, it was all dark wood with stained glass windows in the bar and big comfy chairs. They came in and painted everything white. The chairs are now cheap with no cushions. They took all of the charm out of the place to make it look like all the cookie-cutter new places. I was on Listed Sisters on HGTV about 3 years ago on Season 2. It's been great. The quality of the work held up and it's still pretty stylish. I moved, so I Airbnb the house now, and the HGTV aspect seems to sell it well. Nothing bad to say at all. HGTV chipped in for some repairs as well since my ceiling fell in during the renovation. I'm a professional shadow boxer and my wife is an actual mannequin. Our budget is $3 million. I was going to be on House Hunters a few years back, but my realtor didn't respond when we called him about it. I knew a guy who was part of one of those shows back when we were in middle school together. His family was extremely white trash and substance addict types, but they got all cleaned up for the show. Within the first year after the makeover, the house was a pit again. A local restaurant was on one of those restaurant makeover shows. The show made them take their most popular item off the menu. They took a pretty good restaurant and made it pretty bad. Before the show, they were decently busy. You could get a reservation some days during the week, but weekends were packed out. After the hype of the show died down, you could walk in and get seated even on weekends. This made me immediately think of DIY SOS. I really hope that those homes held up well. The families that get in there deserve real homes that last. Yes, DIY SOS worked on a house just a few doors up from me a couple of years ago, and it still looks amazing. The guy was disabled and they made him his own little house at the bottom of the garden, and it looks great. It was pretty cool walking to school and casually walking past Nick Knowles and the rest of them. I work for a high-end home builder. I've signed NDAs, so I can't say who we've built for, but let's just say we've built for the owners of Smunda Sharmore and the owner of Schmamazon. And even with the type of work we do, where everything is top-notch materials and craftsmanship, we still have to go back year after year to fix things. Houses settle, paints crack, homeowners drop things on the tile floors, and these are houses that take us 3 years at least to build from the ground up or renovate. I can't stand those shows who remodel in like 2 weeks. There's just no way to do that without issues down the line. I was building a very energy-efficient house, and Renovation Nation did an episode about it. They made us out to be heroes for building green in what was then a, quote, terrible neighborhood, while the camera panned over to my neighbor's house across the street. He hated me for about 10 years after that. Honestly, there's not much to look at when you build that way, so I think the show was probably pretty boring. We did add solar panels recently, and now the house produces as much energy as it uses. Can you imagine being the neighbor and watching that show to see if your house is visible? And then the narrator says, in stark contrast to the degenerates across the street, and cuts to you on your balcony? It would be a real, hey, what the moment. Oh please, you guys complaining about bad fixes. I live in Brazil. When they did this to a house here in my city, not 2 days later the house was entirely robbed. That's what you get broadcasting on national TV about all of the expensive electronics you've put in a house in a dangerous neighborhood. The show was whatever Luciano Huck's show was called back then. My brother's house was on one of these shows. The light fixtures and such that were in the house were hideous, and they renovated it to their liking, but yeah, it wasn't in their taste. My sister had her bathroom remodeled for a show. They took two back-to-back ancient 1970s-styled bathrooms and made one giant bathroom with a walk-in, no door shower, and a bathtub that fills from a faucet in the ceiling, and marble sinks. They paid for all the materials while the show paid for the design and labor. Still, the show said, "You have to buy those two sinks. They're $1,500 each. Yes, buy them." She did further renovations later, but rents that house out now because they bought a new place. I think the bathrooms certainly brought a wow factor from the renters. If it were me, having two back-to-back bathrooms with updated fixtures and paint would be worth a lot more than one giant bathroom with separate walk-in shower, huge 50-gallon tub and a single toilet, and those two marble sinks. Because practically speaking, only one person can use that at a time, and it feels like you're pooping in a living room or something. It's so big. In any case, I think the renovation certainly added appeal and value to the house for sure. What happened when someone got revenge on their bully? Okay, I hate the term bully in this context, but a former man-child neighbor had issues understanding that it wasn't okay to throw his garbage in my yard or let his drunk friends pee on my house. When the county cops didn't do anything about the numerous calls, I started bagging the garbage and throwing it on his porch. So, he escalated to putting rat poison in hot dogs and throwing them to my German Shepherd mix. I saw her convulsing and found 3 packages worth of hot dogs studded with pellets right along the fence. She pulled through, no worse for wear. The cops said I couldn't prove who did it, so the next time he threw garbage in my yard, which usually contained the guts and waste from his hunting and fishing, I gathered fish guts into a bag and waited until he left, and put them in the rafters of his porch, under the hedges in his yard, and finally inside his air conditioner unit. About 3 days later, he had all the doors and windows open. The following week, he was having the carpet replaced throughout the house. Eventually, the guts rotted away and the smell faded, but I think he knew that I did it because I never found trash in my yard again. Do not mess with my frickin' dogs. I grew up in a small town. We had one girl who everyone thought was the prettiest girl in the whole wide school. She was a mean, petty witch. Truly awful. For example, my cat died when I was in 5th grade. She sat behind me, muttering about how funny it was that my cat died, that he was a stupid cat, that he died because my mum was too poor to take him to the vet, and urging me to cry. Are you gonna cry? Are you gonna cry about it? Like a big baby? Big baby, cry over your stupid cat? Everyone's gonna see you cry. You're about to cry, aren't you? And so on and so forth. This wasn't even the meanest thing she did, and she was mean to everyone. One day in 6th grade, I'd had enough. She didn't even do anything truly awful. I was just like, F Jennifer G. And I decided to do something about her. I stole one of my mum's little index or recipe cards and meticulously wrote, "I stuff my bra," in big bold letters. I stuffed that and a little gold safety pin in my jacket pocket. The next day, I carefully affixed this to the back of her pink members-only jacket just before first bell rang. She walked around with this damn note all day, confused as to why people were laughing at her. She screamed and screamed when she found it, and she cried. Everyone saw her cry. Man, and I think people probably would have clued her in or shown some pity if she wasn't, as you say, pretty awful to everyone. These people who dish it out but can't take it really just are something special, aren't they? Not really a bully so much, but I was working at my university in the Division of Student Life as a GA, and I'd worked myself into a great position where people trusted me and relied on my advice. One night at a big party at a local university bar, I had the craving for a cigarette. I asked this group of girls if they had one, and being one to not bum straight up, I offered a coupon for a free McDonald's fries if someone would give me a cig. One of the cuter girls there, with a pink stripe in her hair, said yes, pulled out her cigs, and I gave her the coupon. She then put her cigs back in her pocket and told me to F off after stealing my fry coupon. I was teed off at this point, and I tried reasoning with her. Seriously, 1 cigarette? She then called over a couple of guy friends and said that I was falsely accusing her of stealing from me, and her friends all backed her up. She looked me in the eyes and said, "You shouldn't be so trusting." Fast forward to Monday, we had job interviews for the division, and I happened to be passing through replacing a computer. I also happened to see the same pink stripe in hair individual that had stolen the McDonald's coupon from me the week before in line. I went to the person conducting the interviews and told him that she was a thief and a liar. On my way out, I smiled and waved. She didn't recognize me. She didn't get the job, and the interviewer thanked me for my contribution to the interview process. I had a similar situation once before, but it wasn't as sweet for me. I lived with my older sister, who constantly had friends over. One night after work, I came home and saw two of her new friends outside my house. They were looking into an opened backpack. I thought nothing of it, even though they bolted when they saw me. I got inside, my sister was passed out, and my Wii was gone. This being 2 months out of release. Went to the cops, told them who it was, and they basically told me that my Wii had already likely been sold for substances. The revenge, if you could call it that, came about a year later. Some guy came into my work for an interview. When he left, I told my boss who he was, and he never got the job. I also had a chance to groin block him at the bar a few years later. It was all petty revenge, but I'll take what I can get. I was in 4th grade and I'd been bullied by a kid named Rocky. I swear to God that was his name. He was in 6th grade. Anyway, he'd trip me, knock books out of my hands, punch me and stuff. One day out on the playground, he pushed me onto the merry-go-round while it was spinning. I was rolled around inside it while people were trying to stop it. The whole time he was laughing at me. I got pulled out and I was scraped up pretty good. I got taken to the office to get patched up. The teachers asked what happened and I told them I fell. Then I went back outside, saw him standing there with his buddies, ran as fast as I could toward him and punched him as hard as I could in the face. I broke his nose and just stood there looking at him ready to fight. His buddies told him to leave me alone and I never got picked on again at school. When I was about 7 years old, there was a girl on the bus who would pull my hair and pick on me. I'd come home crying. My parents asked the driver to move our assigned seating, but they refused. My dad asked me how I could fix the problem, and I responded, "How can I do anything if I'm not allowed to hit?" Which was the rule. And my dad said, "Well, you're not allowed to hit, but you're allowed to not get hit." He explained what I should do, and I did it. When the girl sat next to me, I should put my back against the wall, my feet on her thigh, and slide her off the seat. She fell, cried, I got in trouble, and the assigned seating was moved. Problem solved. In short, pushed her out of my seat, made her cry, and convinced the bus driver to change our assigned seating. I told him that if he told me to self-delete one more time, I'd punch him in the face. He didn't believe me and told me to go self-delete. I punched him in the face, broke his glasses, and gave him a nosebleed, and he never spoke to me again. My buddy and I pulled a prank on a bully called Adam during the last 2 weeks of high school. We were hanging out at home playing video games and Adam surprised us by stopping by, under the guise of apparently wanting to be friends, despite having picked on us for the better part of 4 years, and one time shanking me with a pencil. Within about 5 minutes, he was pressuring me to write his final assignment for him. A speech for debate class. At first I said no. I mean, what is this, some comic book cliché? What'll he demand next, my milk money too? But then my buddy kept winking at me, putting the pressure on and convinced me that we should do it. After some negotiation, we agreed to put together a speech for him, but only if Adam would pay us $25 and also pick up a rather elaborate dinner order from Wendy's for us to eat that night. He agreed. My buddy and I ate well that night, and we had a plan. What we actually gave Adam was a quickly and pretty poorly written and somewhat incendiary speech titled "The Silliness of Martin Luther King Day," which contained, among other statements, the one that, if America really wanted to celebrate a true hero, it would instead be Joe Namath Day. And I'm serious, that's what we wrote. We honestly believed Adam would read this at home, realize he had been had, and be forced to rewrite and memorize a new speech in the wee hours of the night. Except, it didn't go down that way. Imagine my surprise when Adam actually delivered that very speech in class the next day. He didn't have the memorization down, he kept referencing his papers, but he marched on. And the look on our teacher's face was just priceless. I think I peed my pants, I was giggling so hard. The other kids in the classroom were in shock. As I recall, the teacher made Adam stop his presentation and told him to leave the classroom, and she yelled at him in the hallway. As far as I know, Adam never fessed up that he hadn't actually written that paper, and I'm still not quite sure he ever really figured out just how brilliantly he had been played. What? Wow, that's just wow. I mean, I had to Google Joe Namath, and it seems like he's not anyone super controversial or anything, but even just the title of The Silliness of Martin Luther King Day is giving me anxiety and probably nightmares of YouTube cancellation if I said that. So yeah, I don't know how he didn't realize it was bunk the second he wrote it. Well, I graduated and they're either substance dealers, in jail, or dead. The best revenge is just living well. In my secondary school, when you were about to leave, you would wear your school uniform shirt on the last day and people would sign it for you. There was also an option to wear your own clothes for the last few days. So this guy who was leaving came decked out in the best of 1980s sports fashion, wielding a permanent marker, and instead of signing the shirts of leavers, he went around scribbling on the shirts of kids who were younger. Now, bear in mind, we were pretty poor, and if I came home with my uniform in a mess, I'd get grief because we couldn't afford to replace it. He grabbed me and scribbled all over my shirt, and somehow, using as yet unknown Quicksilver powers, I grabbed the marker off him and managed to scribble not only all over his Sergio D-bag windbreaker, but all over his face and neck. He punched me in the chest, I'm a girl, but it was worth it. Two random strangers came during a bullying session in a public place, and they punched my bully for some time while calling me their friend. His entire class was afraid of me after that. I still don't know who my saviors were, but thank you. Well, my revenge took place years after the bullying, but let me tell you, the feeling was magnificent. I was driving one night and I got rear-ended. This took me by surprise, simply because I thought this was at 3 in the morning and I was the only vehicle on the road at this time in this area. Or so I thought. Turns out he was driving drunk, and I just so happened to have neck pains and trouble sleeping due to the traumatic event when I testified in court. So I was able to sue him for enough to pay medical, my vehicle, and a little extra pocket money. That's what you fricking get for pushing me into the locker, Chad. Well, I just did the deed on and off with his sister for 2 years. I had a friend who had a bully. He had a locker above my friend and would intentionally drop books on her head, push her around, and insult her throughout the year. And we all had a class together where he was generally a jerk to anyone that he could be a jerk to. Before class started and before anyone else was in class yet, the teacher had to step out for a bit and it was just the 3 of us in the room. My friend was and still is very tiny, but that day it didn't matter. She snapped and had enough of his crap and went on the attack. I don't think she could have done much damage on her own, but I stepped in. Puberty was swift for me and I was one of the largest kids in my school. By 5th grade, I was already the size of an adult woman. I pinned him to the wall and let my friend kick the crap out of him and punch him in the jewels. He didn't speak to either of us after that, and we never got into any trouble. I don't think he wanted to tell anyone that he got beat up by a couple of girls. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I got bullied by this girl in high school for being fat. I lost 100 pounds after I graduated. I looked completely different. Even some family who didn't see me during the process just didn't recognize me. Then I ran into this girl again 2 years after high school at Starbucks. She started a conversation with me as we were stuck at the same table together in the busy cafe. We talked, and a week later we did the deed. And then I added her on Facebook to show her who I was. She just did the deed with the fat kid she grew up bullying. Not your traditional revenge, but hey, bumping uglies with my old bully is worth something, right? Not me, but a good friend of mine, sophomores in high school. Eric kept a Gatorade in the side pocket of his book bag for lunch every day. Just before second period would start, Eric would put down his bag in class and go out to the bathroom. When he'd come back, his Gatorade was always empty. This went on for about 2 weeks, and no one would ever tell him who it was. When finally, one day he came back from the bathroom to another kid running out of the room, retching and holding his pants. Apparently, Eric had had enough of his Gatorade being taken, and he put a few drops, like half a bottle, of Vicine in the Gatorade before he came to school. That kid had to be admitted to hospital a few days later for the dehydration from so much throwing up and diarrhea from the Vicine. Eric finally knew who it was, and nobody drank his Gatorade anymore. There was a kid named Matt in my school who in 8th grade had developed a rating system for the girls based on the size of their chests, and he kept getting away with saying gross things to them. He had been reported to the guidance counselor and faculty repeatedly, but they kept saying, "We can't do anything about it if we don't personally see it happening." Which is like, do you think he's stupid enough to do it in front of you? He also kept calling me Mimi after the Drew Carey Show character. I was getting sick of it after a few months and fruitlessly talking to the guidance counselor about that as well. I finally realized that none of the adults were going to do anything about it. Then one day at lunch he called me Mimi and I turned around and told him, "If you call me that again, you're not going to like my reaction. I don't know what I'm going to do, but you're not going to like it." Which was true. I just figured I'd react in the moment. 30 minutes later he called me Mimi in the hallway and I turned around and gave him a big, open-palmed roundhouse slap across the face. He was completely taken aback. All I had to say was, "I told you weren't going to like it." I got suspended for about a week. My parents were furious at me. However, Matt never made his stupid comments to anyone ever again. He was totally polite from that day forward. I don't generally advocate violence, but I still feel like it was a proportional response to months and months of gross behavior on his part, especially in the absence of adults who were willing to hold him accountable. I told the administration and my parents as much when I received my suspension. Big shrug. Oh boy, the Drew Carey Show really was just a different period of television, wasn't it? Go watch that show if you really want an idea of just how far we've come in terms of the average quality of television these days. We live in a golden age, folks. I finally snapped one day and went way overboard. I went full R-word, screaming and roaring at him and hitting him until he was down, and then I just kept hitting him, and kept hitting him, and kept hitting him. To this day, I don't remember ever stopping. I was just down the hall being taken to the office. All I got was ISS, which seemed like a win for me. This was in kindergarten. I used to get pushed around by a kid. I told my dad about it, and he told me to smack him around if he touches me. Fast forward to lining up for the water fountain a few days later. The kid was behind me, and he gives me a shove while in line. Whatever. I start taking a drink, and he pushes me into the wall. I turn around and punch him in the face. He drops, crying. As luck would have it, the vice principal somehow saw me punching the kid, but not the kid smashing my head against the wall and fountain. So, I get called into the office, and my dad is called for a meeting. And this is where it goes south for the vice principal. Dad comes in furious. He works nights and was woken up mid-sleep, and he wants to know why I was called to the office. The vice principal tells him what he saw, and I tell my dad what happened. My dad then proceeds to ask the vice principal, "How in the F," and that particular swear word echoed down the K3 hallway, "How in the F do you decide to discipline my kid but not the other kid who has a history of violence in the school?" That conversation got progressively heated, and as it was 20 years ago, I don't remember much else of it, but I do know the more the vice principal tried to explain himself in vain, the worse his argument became to my dad. At the end of it, I wasn't disciplined. The kid never screwed with me again and moved away in grade 6, and the vice principal took a conveniently timed 2-week holiday beginning the day after this occurred, and transferred at the end of the year. Violence solves nothing, they tell you. For me, violence is the only way to keep people from taking advantage of me. Second story, this kid in my grade 9 year liked to pick on me because I was short and stocky. I let him chirp all he wanted until he put his hands on me. One shot to the chiclets and this kid started bleeding from the mouth. This happened in front of a good number of his buddies. Suffice to say, people didn't mess with me anymore after that in high school. I kind of felt bad for him though. He got some chipped teeth and his parents didn't have benefits for dental care to get them fixed, so he was kinda screwed in that regard. I beat my bully up until he cried. Turns out he wasn't a total hard man, and his friends didn't back him up. He tried to be friendly in the weeks afterwards. Last I heard, he had a bad dirt bike accident, got addicted to pills, and was found after 2 weeks in an unowned house. It's kinda sad, actually. My former bully gave me my order at Dairy Queen. She asked how I was doing, and I told her, getting a mortgage, engaged, and about to graduate with a bachelor's in science. I asked her how she was doing. Well, I'm here, so... yeah, it was deliciously awkward. I had a kid in middle school who was kinda mean to me and my friends over the course of a year. One day he tried to throttle me in gym class with a cord. It was kinda jokingly, however I'd had enough and went to the principal with my parents and witnesses of that event. My parents threatened to press attempted murder charges on the kid. Also, he had been caught with a knife in his backpack. That kid was permanently expelled from the school. I believe he's actually in prison now for attempted murder on someone else. In high school, I had a verbal bully. He never got physical, but I would always hear about how fat I was or what I was reading. This was in the early to mid-90s, so manga wasn't as mainstream as it is now. He lived a few streets down, and his parents knew he did all that stuff, they just didn't care. So in my junior year, a new high school opened and I transferred over. He stayed at the old school. I helped set up all the new computers and networks at the new school, and I graduate. The school then hires me as a computer tech, which was great because it was awesome pay for an 18-year-old. So my first year as a computer tech, who do I see? That's right, he did something in his senior year at my old school that got him kicked out and had to repeat his junior year. So he was now a year behind me. So I'm walking through the hallways with an assistant principal. Damn, I missed that guy. I would have followed him to a school in hell itself. I was talking with said assistant principal about what computers I was going to move and stuff. The bully sees me and just starts up again like no time had passed. I just stare at him and then at the AP. He lays into my bully about showing proper respect for the faculty and staff, while my bully just has this dumbfounded look on his face. It was amazing. I mean, ideally, the assistant principal would have laid into him regardless of whether you were faculty or not, but still, that's some lovely just dessert you get to feed him there. I wouldn't say I took revenge, I just finally snapped like Ralphie from A Christmas Story one day and started repeatedly punching him. In the middle of maths class, too. The teacher took me out of class and I figured that I was doomed and on my way to see the headmaster. She said she knew he was a bully, but hitting people in her class was not okay and to never do it again. Then she placed him on detention. The bully gave some kind of grudging apology the next day and said he respected me for finally standing up for myself. Well, thanks, I guess. He never bothered me again anyway. I outgrew mine after puberty, outsizing him. The F-word became much smaller than me, and we fought a year or so later so badly that his family took him out of my school. Turns out I had a thing about bullies, and then I enjoyed bullying younger bullies. Oh, I remember a story where I totally got revenge on this C-word. She was horrid. We were at a retreat that I'd saved for ages to go to, and everyone else was a stereotypical rich kid who didn't like anyone who wasn't rich. They knew my budget for the weekend was $100 and didn't want me to join them for meals, so their solution was to go to $100 plus steakhouses every night. They called me the poor B-word, and my roommate for the hotel we were staying in was just awful. So after her being particularly toxic for one day and then leaving for dinner, I realized there was one day left at the retreat and her underwear drawer was unguarded. I put icy hot on her last pair of clean underwear. Frick you, witch. Enjoy the burn down there, maybe the next time she'll be more careful who she teases. I used to get bullied for my lunch money in middle school by two guys for a whole year, one of whom used to be my friend in elementary school. They'd sucker slap me across the face from behind, push me against lockers, spear me. This is when Goldberg was popular in WCW. It got worse because this girl who I'm still friends with would stick up for me. What made it worse was the fact that she was a girl sticking up for a boy, which in their words made me a sissy B-word. Well, as time progressed, I started growing rapidly in height, towering over them, while the two guys were pretty much the same height or only grew a couple of inches. They stopped picking on me physically, obviously, but kept verbally at it. I guess I just snapped because they were picking on one of my other friends for lunch money, and I kneed the guy in the solar plexus and just rammed the other guy's head into a water fountain as hard as I could. The feeling I got after doing that made me so violently hyped and surprised at how light they were. All three of us got ISS for a week. They avoided my presence ever since that incident. I did have to watch my back though because their friends threatened to jump me. Nothing came of it, just a bunch of scared loud hyenas with hurt egos. What caused a teacher to have a complete breakdown? Woohoo, do I have a story for this one? A few years ago, I took a class in design theory. It was the pet project of the head of the college and taught the design principles behind everything from common household objects to room layouts to entire organizations. It was an absolutely brutal class, but uniquely informative. One day, towards the end of the semester, we went over the use of humor in design. The professor spent the entire class talking about how laughter and amusement can be used to engage an audience and change how people see a situation. The whole time he was laughing, cracking jokes, good ones too, and generally making sure the class had a good time. At the end of the lesson, he told us not to underestimate the power of laughter. After all, it was how he had gotten through the lecture that day. His father had died a couple of days prior. He broke down crying after he told us. It's probably the most impactful lecture I've ever attended. The teacher in question was bullied and disrespected every day. One day, an idiot threw a geometry compass and it stuck in the corkboard like a thrown knife right beside her while she was writing on the board. Instant meltdown. She was in tears, she left the class, and I never saw her again. I can't blame her. She probably thought her life was in danger at that point. Some schools and neighborhoods are very hard. The teacher learned that one student had cheated on a history essay. After getting this kid suspended for 2 days, repeat offender, she discovered that almost 2/3 of the class in that subject was cheating as well. I don't know what happened after that, but she literally broke down when she found out that my class knew about it. We were in a different subject, so we weren't part of that scandal. Grade 10 science class, we were taking turns using some kind of lung capacity measuring device. Breathe into a tube and a small plastic ball gets raised by the force of your breathing. Something gets measured somehow. I can't really remember the details aside from the plastic ball. Anyway, the teacher takes his turn, apparently trying to show off how hard he can breathe out. He somehow breaks the measuring device. The teacher goes into a rage after realizing he broke it, briefly tries to fix it, gives up, picks up a metal garbage can and throws it in anger, then storms out of the room and doesn't come back for 10 to 15 minutes, at which point he returns and acts like nothing happened. It was more bizarre and amusing than anything else. You have to wonder what had been happening in that man's life for the last week or so for that to be the straw that broke the camel's back. It's better than thinking about the other possibility, that this is just how this man reacted to every inconvenience. Next up, a tiny story that still made me shed a tear reading it. My math teacher in the 8th grade was extremely pregnant, and our exchange student from Brazil called her beautiful. She broke down in tears and admitted she didn't feel very pretty. She was a substitute teacher at an elementary school, and at some point a kid took it too far and threw a bottle at her. It was an empty plastic bottle, but still, poor teacher. My favorite science teacher in high school was slowly being forced out by the administration. One day in class, she stopped teaching and sat down in front of us and told us that she had just been diagnosed with MS and began sobbing. The entire class got up and gave her a long group hug. It's one of my most cherished memories from that chapter of my life. We made our English teacher cry, but we really didn't want to because we really liked her. She was about to switch to another school and she had some really important things to do. She needed to call someone, so she gave us a task to do and left the room for like 5 minutes. We were a horrible class, around 16 or 17 at the time, and mainly boys. We had breakfast together that day and stuff was still in the classroom. So the boys decided it was time to throw it around and hit the window with a stick of butter. While one boy tried to clean the window using a squeegee, someone else decided to throw out the trash. Another teacher came because she saw the trash flying out the window of the classroom, and in that moment she started yelling at us. The other teacher came back. She immediately started crying as she saw what was going on. I think she was angry and overwhelmed because she liked the school and didn't want to leave, but at this moment we were the little buttholes making the decision easier. But the next week she came into the class and had written a small poem for us about being too old to throw around trash and playing with butter. Physics teacher came into class late, walked past the podium and walked into the chalkboard, like he would have kept walking if it wasn't there. He then picked up one of those plastic pen things that you put chalk in, proceeded to try and write on the chalkboard even though the pen was empty of chalk, all the while mumbling incoherently. Found out later he had had a stroke and managed to drive himself to the university somehow. He didn't return to teaching that year, and as best as I recall, he ended up retiring due to health complications. He was in his 60s, and along with the stroke, he'd fallen and hit his head. Online searching shows he passed away about 8 years afterwards. My 8th grade Spanish teacher and the freshman baseball coach were having an affair. It eventually became public knowledge, and she had several breakdowns as her divorce played out over the course of my 8th grade year. I had the pleasure of joining the freshman baseball team the next year and experiencing his own share of breakdowns from his own divorce. Oh boy, I had a class in college for hand-drafting construction documents. Basic stuff. I guess it was like 8th or 9th year, the teacher had taught the class and hadn't really changed the curriculum. So at one point a project got assigned, I ended up being very sick at the time and had some extra time to work on it. Nothing hard, just tedious. The first day I came back, the teacher came in and just freaking unloaded on the class. Apparently, a student from a previous semester had given someone their project to copy, and that had gotten passed around. And that project had some noticeable error on it, so when everyone turned in their projects, the teacher quickly noticed that there were tons of copies. The school had a zero-tolerance policy on cheating, but I think at the time the department couldn't just drop something like 15 students, so they were all placed on academic probation for a year. My university physics professor got the call that his dog had died right before a test. Needless to say, we didn't have a test that day. There was this science teacher already on the verge of a breakdown. We called her Molecule. Someone wrote that on a leaf of one of the plants in class, and she started crying and pretty much had a breakdown. When people endure bullcrap for too long, they can completely fall apart over the seemingly smallest, silliest thing. One time in class, the emo girl was not having it. I don't even remember how it got started, but she ended up bickering with the teacher, and the emo girl called the teacher Thunder Chest. It was at this point that the emo girl was sent to the office, and the teacher had to take a seat at her desk in the back for a few minutes. My junior high biology teacher legitimately used to have weird flashbacks of when he fought at Vietnam. That stuff was pretty sad to see. We had a substitute teacher that would make all the students in the class pop open their metal binder rings in unison. Otherwise, the sound of multiple binder rings opening at different times would remind him of artillery sounds. Man, I had a junior high maths teacher like that. I thought it was just a rumor. One day he was sitting at his desk towards the end of class and he just got this dazed look. Suddenly he started yelling about weird things and we all got super quiet. There were rumors that he'd thrown things during these episodes before, but I never saw that. The one that sticks out for me is my history teacher, who was a level 10 incompetent at anything. She usually blathered on through class about stupid things. She was always very well put together, dressed well, hair done. It's just there was no substance to her teaching or conversational topics. One day she started talking about a co-worker she was very close to when she was young. Mind you, she had to be approaching her 60s. The story started out innocent enough where we were all basically ignoring her, and pretty soon it veered off into this terrible reality. Her co-worker had gone home from work and died in a car accident on the way home. This had to have been 30 years ago. She was crying, saying how much she missed her, and how crazy life can be. The way she explained the story was so sad too. They'd made plans the following day, and my teacher was excitedly waiting for that co-worker to come in. I disliked that teacher immensely, but I do feel sorry for her. She stood there crying because her friend was gone. I don't think at 15 I could imagine that sort of loneliness or pain. But now, a good 15 years later, I've had her experiences and I sympathize with her. I mean, yeah, that is inappropriate as all hell. Since it seems like this story is from a while ago, it seems a little wistful to hope that she got therapy, because that truly sad story probably needed to be unpacked somewhere else. My history and government teacher has been to Vietnam, and it's quite known that he was on the front lines. So, in the middle of a lecture, a girl raised her hand and asked, "Have you ever killed someone?" The question caused him to go silent and leave the room for quite a while. Luckily, the girl was ripped a new one by her fellow classmates. My best friend caused the school librarian to lose it because she thought she caught him cranking it in the non-fiction section. For clarification, the librarian accused my friend of tickling his pickle in said section of the school library. He's denied all allegations and refuses to answer any more questions on the matter. Not my teacher, but my younger sister's one at the time. The class was making fun of her recently losing a baby and her mum dying of cancer. Yes, children are cruel. Jesus Christ. My math professor in college was going through a divorce and they were fighting for custody of their 2 younger children. You can tell he was irritated because he wore his emotions on his sleeve. One day he came into class about 5 minutes late and he was physically shaking. He was violently crying and apologized to us and said the class was cancelled. He apparently lost the custody fight with his ex-wife. I had something similar. My math teacher, around 2006, was going through a divorce. We all got the impression it had thrown her deep into some sort of depression. She was absent a lot and sometimes she just gave us a paper with math problems to solve while sitting lethargically at her desk. One time she totally broke down in front of us. She just randomly told us that she saw one of those "Have you seen our cat?" flyers pinned to a tree and called the owners to ask how it is to own a cat. The owner felt ridiculed and allegedly shouted something, and she sobbed while repeating, "I just wanted to know how it is to have a cat." Man, I felt so bad for her. Some absolute moron said he'd pee on the teacher's grandpa's grave. Said grandpa had died 2 days earlier. He was showing us a diagram of a baby in the womb when it started off as an egg, and the diagram was spinning around and we kept asking if the baby spins out for 9 months and does it get dizzy. He headbutted a locker. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This one cool guy, let's call him Davey, tormented our English teacher for no reason. She was a very sweet and passionate lady about her job, but this guy was a DICK. He would write things on the board before class, really small in random spots like witch, pig, and just other random insults and swear words. The one day that he caused the breakdown was when he stole the remote for the wall-mounted TV. Her class was the time period that had the daily announcements, so the TV was heavily used. So she searched for the remote, couldn't find it, and had to stand on her tippy toes to control the TV from the button on the front. A little bit through the announcements, the TV turned off. Everyone's reaction was weird, so the teacher got back up to turn the TV on again. A minute or so later, it went off again. Of course, at that point, she starts getting suspicious and jokes, "Okay, is someone playing a prank on me?" No one says anything because nobody knew Davey had the remote. He repeats turning it off 2 more times directly after she turned it back on, and she snapped, "Okay, who has the remote? Who's doing this?" And being immature 9th graders, we all started snickering because that crap was pretty funny. After nobody fessed up, she starts unloading about how she's having a tough time lately and starts spewing out all this info about her personal life, just ranting away. During the middle of her rant, Davy turns the TV on and starts flipping through the channels. The teacher lets out an animalistic yell and bursts into tears. Cue the entire class with shocked Pikachu face. She throws the classroom door open and runs out. She was gone for like 20 minutes and returns with the Junior Reserves Officers Training Corps representative for our school. Literally our hard-as-nails drill sergeant. He was calmly talking to us about how what we were doing as a class was crappy to her and the perp needs to step forward, and fricking Davy had the stones to turn the TV off and on. Dead silence. You could have heard dust falling on the ground and everyone was like, "We're dead." At this point, someone who knew he took it quietly pointed at Davy. The drill instructor goes over to Davy and literally pulls him up out of his desk by his shirt collar and screams in his face, "Do you have the fricking remote?" Feet dangling off the ground, his whole arm was shaking as he took the remote out of his pocket and showed it. His butt was grass now. He was swiftly removed from the class by the drill instructor and the teacher, while we all sat there for the rest of the class, doing nothing until the bell rang. Most JROTC programs have 2 instructors, one senior, a retired officer, and the other one a junior, usually a retired NCO like your sergeant. Ours was a Chief Master Sergeant. Nice guy so long as you didn't tee him off. The guy was in his 50s and ran to school every day, couple of inches short of 7 feet, and he looked like he was carved out of wood. He didn't need to say anything. His presence just commanded respect. Only one time I saw him lose his crap was when a couple of stupid students outside the room kept being loud and mouthed off when he came and asked them to quiet down. He stormed up to their faces and basically goes drill instructor on their butts. He came back into class and everyone was dead silent, and without missing a beat he goes back to teaching like nothing had happened. Needless to say, the formerly popular hangout spot was no longer popular. Nothing like being screamed at by a military NCO to set you straight, hopefully. I do wonder where that falls in terms of the kids being able to report on excessive harshness at the hands of faculty, but then again, which administrator is going to mess with one of those guys? That's a whole other kettle of fish. I can provide a more positive breakdown from years ago. English teacher realized not 5 minutes into the discussion of a book that only a few people had done the assigned reading, and he put his book down on the table and went on a tirade about how you can't just go through life assuming that other people will pick up your slack, and that it's important to value your education and not just bullcrap your way through classes. I could tell he was disappointed in the class, and several students were embarrassed for not putting in a little bit of effort to read a fricking book. 2 girls were chatting during math class while one did the other's hair. My math teacher couldn't take it, got a meter stick and slammed it on the one girl's desk, yelling, "No hairdressing." We were all shocked. It was so odd. Joke's on him though, she became a hairdresser. We'll call him Mr. Jiggles. Of course, that's not his real name. It's not anybody's real name, but it's fitting enough as he was a rather large fella. A nice man all the same, just rotund. Now, I heard he was on angel dust, I heard he was infected by devils, I heard all manner of rumors, but from the mouth of Mr. Jiggles, none of that was true. So one day in the middle of class, he just stopped giving a lecture and somehow became stricken with the idea that he was Jesus. I'm not making this up. It does sound like bullcrap, even writing it, but I assure you that it happened. 1998 was the year to be exact. He left the classroom and stood in the hallway waiting for class change, and then picked students to bless. He'd walk up, bless a student, and then walk away, all the while preaching loudly that he was the coming of Christ. I'm not sure if it was the second coming in his mind. Who knows? Maybe it was the first. That was unclear. But one of the students wasn't receptive to his blessing and swatted at his hand. Mistake. Mr. Jiggles grabbed him by the throat and dragged him down the hallway, promising to personally carry him into hell. He actually just carried him into a biology teacher's classroom. That teacher tried to talk him down, but it wasn't working. The police and emergency medical services arrived quickly, and no one was hurt. Now, I think everyone just assumed Mr. Jiggles was fired, but the next year he was back. Everyone had a version of the story and a theory for why it happened. Some say his wife was cheating on him, others said it was some substance-induced psychosis. But one day at lunch we were talking about something unrelated and I just asked him point blank what had happened. And the answer? He was on some kind of psych meds, he had run out and forgot to refill them before hitting empty. His pharmacy was out of that particular medicine, told him it would be 5 days before they got it in, and he thought he'd be fine for that 5 days. Well, he was mistaken. September 11th, 2003. I was a senior in high school. Although on the East Coast, we weren't close to New York. And to my knowledge, the teacher had no connections with anyone from New York. We were in the first period and we'd had a moment of silence and remembrance at the time the first plane hit the tower. I think it was a Channel 1 thing. The teacher broke down. She was panting, pulling her hair, and began mumbling to herself. The mumbling became louder and she started to pace. Finally, she walked over to a coffee pot that was in the room, picked up a large Ziploc bag of ground coffee while screaming, "Man, I wish this was smack. I need it right now." She then fell against the wall and slid down. We let her go on for a minute or two before a few of my friends and I went over and helped her up and walked her to the front office. We got the best long-term substitute after that, a true influence I'd only seen a few times in all of my schooling. Ooh, I feel legitimately bad about causing this one. Junior year of high school, my literature teacher was from Wisconsin and had a very thick Midwestern accent. This was in the South, so a number of her intonations were very noticeable. In particular, words with an AG syllable stuck out. Like bag would be pronounced like a mixture of bay and egg. Bag. She was reading a passage from Beowulf to the class one day, and to paraphrase the modern English translation, came across the following sentence. So Beowulf killed the dragon with the dagger. It was too many Midwestern syllables too close together for my friend and I to handle it tactfully in our 16-year-old mindset, and involuntarily we laughed. Upon attempting to cover it up, it probably sounded more like a snicker and she did not take it well. I wish I could say she scolded us, but it was so much worse than that. She shut the book, looked at the floor and straight up cried for what must have been 45 seconds. But it felt like 45 minutes, I can tell you. Dejected, breathless sobs. Once she had recovered from this, she picked it back up from where she'd left off like it hadn't happened. Even though generally speaking I really disliked that teacher, it sucked knowing that our immature reaction caused her to feel ridiculed. We didn't have malicious intent, but the result was the same. And we of course apologized to her privately after the fact. Yeah, I think it's a mark of hope for a kid if they feel guilt for actually making people cry instead of doubling down and laughing at them more. Not great, not terrible. Hopefully they learn to do better. I wrote a paper about a difficult life experience I'd had growing up, and it made my teacher sob. I just wrote about my sister on the day she passed away and how I felt a few months after that. When my mum came in for a talk about my grades, they talked about loss and cried for a while together. I can tell you I felt very awkward in my classroom after that. A couple of students were arguing across the classroom. One of them thought he'd be clever and tell the other one to go use a noose. The teacher ran out of the room crying and came back in 5 minutes later screaming at him that her dad had self-deleted that way and called him a horrible boy, and she frickin' quit. Like that week. Everyone gave him the verbal kickdown of a lifetime after that class. Perhaps a bit far, but I think somewhat deserved. My IT teacher spent 15 minutes trying to figure out how to turn the volume up for a video. An IT teacher, mind you. Someone who teaches in technology, not knowing how to turn the volume up. When she finally figured it out, the whole class applauded and she broke down and left the room. Admittedly, this makes us look bad, but she was an awful teacher who clearly had no clue about anything in the subject. We didn't like her, so we let her figure it out herself. My God, that poor woman. It was probably some administrator who decided, well, we need an IT teacher and everyone here is old as dirt. Stacy, you graduated 2 years ago, so you're the most qualified with technology. Stacy was probably like, no, I don't know anything about computers. I'm a Spanish major. I can't teach IT. What? Nonsense. You fixed the printer the other day and you got rid of that virus on my phone. The class is yours. No. I just put more paper in the printer and your phone didn't have a virus. It was a Facebook ad that said you had a virus. I don't care. You're teaching the class. Congratulations. What good jobs could young people get qualified in for a great career? Draftsman in the construction industry. Basic knowledge of CAD and construction techniques, and you can get a high-paying job at a metal or millwork fabricator doing shop drawings. No need for an engineering or architect degree. Every company I know is undermanned, and those draftsmen are typically over 50. I started as a drafting major, but I switched after a few semesters. It's a great skill and it can be fun, but when I saw the jobs people were getting, it turned me off. The engineers get to play around and do the fun parts and leave the boring detail work to the draftsmen. Trade work is pretty well known as a solid option, but I'll say specifically, anything related to utilities. Electric, water, gas. I work in that field. I'm 35 and I'm so young compared to virtually everybody else that it's downright uncomfortable most of the time. And these things need to continue existing and being maintained, but I'm not seeing the next generation taking over. I work in utilities, the entire workforce is grey. But I've also been eating crap pay, crap hours, and zero benefits for 2 whole years waiting for someone to retire or die or something so that I can get a real job. It still hasn't happened. They might be dinosaurs, but they jealously guard their cushy public sector jobs and don't leave until that nest is good and padded. Collision repair techs. You change body panels and structural pieces. Repair body panels by pulling dents, bondoing, and sanding them smooth for paint. There's a lot more to it, but that's the general gist of it. You see, everyone wants to be a painter. Painters grow on trees. It's easier and pays more, but it's hard to find a good tech nowadays, at least in my area anyway. CNC tooling, CNC programming, aircraft contracting. I knew of a few contractors making well over $100 an hour and hitting 60-hour weeks. You want to know why all these jobs are aging out? It's because no one wants to train anyone or take on inexperienced people. I'm completely willing and able to learn if I don't have the experience a position is asking for, yet they just assume people are gaining it elsewhere, I guess? How can I gain experience if no one is willing to train me? It's so frustrating. In the US at least, OB-GYNs. About a third of currently practicing OB-GYNs are 55 or older, and as they retire, there aren't enough younger doctors to replace them, which is leading to a major shortage, especially in rural areas. It's estimated that about half of the counties in the United States have 0 OB-GYNs practicing currently, and it's anticipated to get worse over the next couple of years. The narrator would like to add that although there's a lot of ideas being presented in this video, you need to do your due diligence and research how valid a career this is in your particular area, or if you're willing to move to consider practicing it somewhere where there's vacancies and it pays well. This previous example might be a good career in some areas, but there were numerous replies to this, with people chiming in to say the states where OB-GYN wasn't actually a valid career path. So use this video to find jobs that sound interesting, and then use your interest as a springboard to look up the state of the job online and how it could apply in your situation. Medical lab technologist. These are the people that perform all the tests that doctors order. My friend is a clinical lab scientist in a large metropolitan area, and he said hospitals are desperate to find more young people to hire. One of the drawbacks, though, is that this is a job that works around the clock, so a lot of opportunities are for the night shift. You do get paid a hefty amount more, though, if you don't mind working those hours. The auxiliary support side of healthcare is in need of fresh new talent, in my opinion. This covers a wide range of skills and career paths. School psychologists have been stable at roughly a 40% shortage of professionals since the 1960s. It only takes 3 years of grad school. The third year is an internship in which you can expect to make around $50K. Once you get a license from an NASP-accredited program, throw a dart at a map of the US and you can find openings. The national average salary is $70K, plus all breaks and summers are off. We desperately need more people in the field. Every school is intended to have their own school psych, but due to shortages, many of us work at co-ops that serve a number of districts, and may serve as many as 4 or 5 different schools, so no shortage of opportunities. For more information, look us up at nasponline.org. As an example of the desperation, my class of 9 is about to take our first jobs, and we literally have reps from cooperatives and school districts coming into our classes to offer us $70K internships. They've all ended their speeches with, "We need at least one of you, but we want 2 or more if we can convince you." The jobs are out there. Medical laboratory science. It's one of the allied health fields involved in the overall patient care experience. It is an invisible career that most laypeople have no idea that the medical lab is a real place, with real people analyzing the blood and body fluids of the patients to help determine what's wrong with them. To a patient, the lab is the person who draws their blood, and then the doctor comes in with the lab results on their clipboard and that's it. Once the blood is taken from your arm or you pee in a cup at the doctor's office, the specimen gets sent to the lab. Well, that's us. A combination of state-of-the-art instrumentation and technology combined with old-fashioned manual procedures like looking at smears of blood under a microscope. The results we generate tell the doctor if you had a heart attack, a septic, have blood cancer like leukemia, if you're diabetic, have Lyme disease or strep throat, among many other things. We learn about diseases and their symptoms and how to interpret the results we get from your blood to make sure your doctor gets accurate results to help diagnose you. 70% of information a doctor uses to give you a diagnosis comes from laboratory data. The field is aging. Large groups of employees are retiring, and there's very little drive for students to go into programs for this. Nursing programs are so well known, and rightfully so, that many people don't know all the other people involved in your hospital stay you never see. like radiology and respiratory therapy. Many people in the country don't even have programs in college to teach lab science, and national certification and licensure is required to be in the field. We sit for exams just like nurses. Nuclear engineers, reactor operators, and the like. Everyone there is old and in need of replacing as new generations of reactors come online. Please come and work for the US Postal Service. We're super understaffed, most employees are going to be eligible for retirement within the next couple of years, and it beats the hell out of any other job I've had. I make $22 an hour to be a cashier. I have really good health insurance, mediocre dental, it's still better than anywhere else I've found, and a kick-butt retirement account. I'm not going to be leaving the USPS until I can cash in that sweet, sweet pension money. What are the requirements you need? As far as I know, a high school education or GED. That's it. I'm a mail carrier though, and the requirements may differ. I also needed a good driving record. It's heavy work in the holidays, but the rest of the year it's fairly calm and easy. Plus people give you presents and stuff to make up for the extra workload. The training is paid once you get there though, and after your probation period, it's pretty hard to get fired in an understaffed office, as long as you don't wreck anything. Pilots, aviation mechanics, and air traffic controllers. The industry is desperate. Well, the aviation industry isn't helping itself by keeping the total price of the courses required to become a commercial pilot up at a staggering amount. It's simply too expensive for the average person to find it worth investing in. Calibration technicians. If you know what a torque wrench and multimeter are and know how to use them, you're halfway in the door already. All the good jobs are on military installations, but I was pulling $30 an hour at a medical company doing calibrations for them. Social work, but we just don't make masochists like we used to. Commercial, print, and print marketing. People think it's a dying industry, but commercial packaging, think candy bar wrappers, cereal boxes, the cardboard tag package for literally any product, or direct mail flyers, coupons and stuff, and marketing collateral like printed shirts, caps, pens, and flash drives, or point-of-purchase displays like big box store signage, marketing displays, and cardboard pop-ups, random stuff like car and building wraps, they're all exploding. Sure, certain sectors of print are dying, like publication printing for magazines and newspapers and such, but it's still one of the 5 largest markets in the world. 3rd largest when I was in school, but not sure now. The average age of an operations rep is 55, and the average age of a sales rep is 57. People are aging out fast, and the big print companies are desperate for young talent, both on the blue-collar side of production and the white-collar side of management, logistic, analysis, and graphics. Technical glass blowing. All kinds of researchers need this, but the number of people that can do it is very small. The last guy we had at my university to do this made over $80K. My favorite part of being in the UNL science building was watching their glassmaker blow glass. He made it look so beautiful and effortless to make things for the labs. I love it when art and technical skills collide. You know what? With most of these I've been able to at least think, oh, that makes sense, but this one I'm kind of surprised by. I can't find many promising wage specifics in my Google searching, but it seems like there's at least no shortage of jobs if you look in the right places. Printed circuit board designer. During the 90s, those jobs mostly got outsourced to places like India, Singapore, and the Philippines. The problem is you really need at least a couple of PCB designers to locally coordinate with the offshore teams, and a lot of people in those positions are getting close to retirement age. The care industry is in desperate need for employees. However, the typical industry perceives carers as unskilled and lazy, and care as a last resort for those who can't do anything else. These people are caring for people at the final stages of their lives, usually. In other societies, this is such an important role, but people turn their nose up at it, and carers are looked down on and severely underpaid and undervalued in the US. Yes, there is technology that can help, but it can never replace the desperately needed human contact that people crave when they rarely see someone else for days at a time. COBOL programmers. Okay, so it's not necessarily a good career, but there are still lots of old, reliable systems out there running on COBOL and Fortran and the likes. We even still have some RPG programs on our mainframe. There's a big need, and almost everyone who worked with it back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s is retired by now. Amazingly, lawyer. And I'm not talking about in cities. The market in urban centers is flooded. But smaller towns and cities, think under 200,000 people, there's a desperate need for lawyers. Where I live, there are dozens of lawyers who are hanging on past retirement because they can't find anyone to fill their shoes. The problem is, new lawyers tend to only look for job postings online, and old lawyers and small firms don't tend to post online. IRS jobs. The number of people who have one of these under 50 is extremely low. I mean, I'd be interested in one of these, but looking at the vacancies online, it seems you already have to be in the IRS to work at the IRS? It will open up. I work a government job and all jobs are made available to current employees first before outsiders are brought in. It's bad when looking for a job, but great for advancement opportunities. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Spend a few minutes scrolling through this group of answers and you'll notice that damn near every skilled career out there has the same problem. Baby boomers hold all the senior positions and they are retiring and dying at a rapid pace. For Gen X and millennials, your time has come. It's time to seize the day. I mean, the problem is that baby boomers hold all the senior positions and continue to hold them forever until the fricking sun burns out. Manufacturing and industrial for sure. I'm a recruiter for skilled manufacturing and there's a big skill gap. A lot of plants in my area are having difficulties replacing retirees with younger workers because the skills just aren't there. Luckily, a lot of companies are opening up to the idea of some training, which costs money, which lowers starting wages, so that has some downsides too. So we either have extremely experienced older candidates being offered a laughable starting rate, or younger candidates with too little experience to be offered the same starting rate. It's funny how manufacturing is on the rise, but at the same time stuck in this revolving door of too much or too little experience. As a side note, I've gained a new appreciation for blue-collar jobs once I began recruiting for them. Have you seen some of these mechanical or diagrammatic tests some factory applicants have to pass? Yikes, I think my head would explode if I had to take one of those. You know, some of these answers really reveal the demographic of people who comment on the internet. Everyone's spouting off about how college is a sham and they could have made so much money being a plumber. If you go to college, put in some genuine effort and don't pick a bad degree, you're gonna be fine. You'll work a cushy job making solid money, and if your complaint is that you're gonna rot away at your desk, go to the gym, you ungrateful bag of crap. People would kill to not be forced to put their body on the line every day. Also, if you actually look up earning statistics for plumbers and welders, it's not as high as everyone claims. The average salary of a plumber is about $50K, not in the $100 to $150K every Redditor and their grandpa is apparently making. It's hard work. Welding is hard work, and trades in general, guess what? They're hard work. All you people who claim that you'd rather do that than the help desk job you've bummed your way into wouldn't make it a whole year. I've done help desk, I've done heavy welding, and I've done auto mechanic work. I'll take help desk any day. You have so much more energy left at the end of your day to use to be productive. You can take classes, work out, teach yourself stuff. If you put in any amount of effort, you can move into a better role. Internet people are lazy and more content to crap on others than to put the work in to improve their situation. HVAC. This. I've seen HVAC guys working for a utility making $90K a year. Trucking, for sure. I work at a logistics company and there's definitely a shortage of drivers. Most of the drivers I encounter are in their 40s and 50s. Then again, autonomous driving vehicles are on the horizon and it could be the direction the market shifts in. It's all supply and demand. OTR trucking is kind of a crappy job because you're always away from home and you have to sleep in the back of a cab most days. If it paid more, I'm sure the supply of truckers would increase substantially. I mean, the pay isn't bad, but it's kind of stagnated compared to inflation. Watchmakers and clockmakers. The money is good and there are plenty of jobs out there, plus you get to work with beautiful things all day. Harder than a degree, but totally worth it. The trades. Electrician, carpenter, machinist, plumber, and welder. Go to trade school for 2 years and $2,000. Get a job. For years, people told their kids they need to go to college so they get a good job, but these trades often have strong unions, good pay, consistent work, and now a labor shortage. You'll have very little debt, if any, and it can be a great move. I mean, trades seems to be the popular recommendation, but after seeing my neighbors, I really wouldn't advise it. Anecdotal, of course, but so many carpenters I know are retiring in their 40s because their bodies just can't handle it anymore. My neighbor is getting surgery on his leg every single year. We're the same age, but he looks 10 years older than me. He's also in commercial and is a supervisor. He builds all the hospitals for Kaiser in the Bay Area. So we've had two schools of thought on the trades. Either they're a great idea, or that they're overrated and actually a really hard option for the money. I'd like to venture that I do know a lot of people of all ages who got by pretty well in their lives on the trades without ongoing health issues, and lots of the ones my age already have supervisor or managerial positions. I think like so many things, it's just doing the job well and going for the right positions in the right locations. Like many other jobs. As we said, do your research, people. Dental lab technician. I make $80K, full benefits, retirement, 3 weeks vacation. Went to 1 year of school. Education is not required though. Nobody knows about the industry. Labs are fiercely competitive for talent. You can learn almost everything on the job. There are labs everywhere. Librarians. Business is still booming despite what some people may think. We're constantly evolving to stay relevant and give people what they want and need, but some librarians just aren't interested in that or can't keep up. Just wanted to add that you definitely need your masters to have a good chance of making it to a good career. There are tons of ALA accredited online programs, but of course they are ridiculously expensive. There's public service loan forgiveness, which helps me make my decision to get my MLIS, although I don't have 100% faith in it. But I was lucky enough to find a full-time position the month after I graduated, and I'm part of a very strong 77-library consortium with positions always opening up and plenty of ways to advance, so I feel secure. It definitely depends on your area too. I wish there weren't so many drawbacks. If it's something you're thinking about doing, I would say try to get a part-time library position if you've never had experience. While not necessary, it does help. And research the programs. If it's truly a passion of yours, maybe look out of state to see how the situation is elsewhere. And there's lots of cool stuff you can do with your degree, even if you don't specialize. I'm a reference and technology librarian, so I do reference stuff, like look up books and movies, place requests, purchase audiobooks, help with databases, and get people started on resumes. I locate any info under the sun that people might need and lots more. The technology part is teaching tech classes, whether it's helping someone with a new smartphone or basic internet schools, training staff, troubleshooting all of our tech, purchasing new software and hardware, running our social media and website, plus all the stuff in our makerspace like the 3D printer and the sewing machine. I'm not just shelving box and pushing carts all day, but that's a cool part too. Insurance. I'd recommend the commercial side rather than the personal lines, mostly due to automation concerns. But the industry has hired in age bands, and thus people are retiring in age bands. I run into very few people in my age group of 25 to 35, and due to the huge generational gap, we tend to stick together, even amongst competitors, and are one of the few industries that I feel doesn't eat our young. We grow them. Plus, with climate change, the evolution of privacy laws like GDPR, and the IoT, it's super interesting. You see things from a bird's eye view and get first-hand, real-time data on things you see just beginning to be reported in the media. Or I might just be a dork. Either or. Cardiovascular perfusion. We're basically heart plumbers, and I'm sure 99% of you have never even heard of the profession. If it weren't for perfusion, cardiac surgery would be impossible. We work in cardiac surgery 90% of the time, and the other 10% we're in ICU taking care of our patients on ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, and we're teaching patients with artificial hearts how to live with their devices. In the next decade, we will lose a huge chunk of the workforce which was trained on the job, and universities aren't pumping out enough graduates, if you'll pardon the pun, to compensate for the future. There's lots of overtime in my future, so you should apply. We need more underrated superstars in ORs everywhere. Manufacturing and machining. Most trade jobs aren't appealing to people anymore because they're seen as low-class manual work, even though that couldn't be further from the truth. Technical jobs are very important. I'm currently taking classes to be a CNC machinist, and there's only 9 people in the class, counting me. Join the rail. We had 2 dudes pass away of old age just last week. Everyone I speak to is nearing retirement and has been at their job for 10 to 15 years. The pay is insane as well. Engineers. We don't produce enough of them in the US, and there's a large population of people in the field for whom most of what they learned in university is obsolete now. Basically, any trade jobs, but you'll likely need at least a year of trade school, and if you're like me and already blew your wad on useless college and are stuck in debt, that tends not to be an option. I still dream of going to trade school to be an electrician. I just need $8,000. A few of my friends were able to get paid to go to school by the companies that wanted to hire them. They offered hands-on training while doing the classroom stuff. I believe a few electrician companies actually run schools themselves. This is in the Midwest, though. Historians and archivists. Most people use their history degree to teach, while the heart and soul of the degree is dying. Most can't keep up with Past Perfect and other archive software, and many museums can't find qualified historians. It's way more fun than people think, and a lot of us just starting are younger by like 40 or 50 years. Are you kidding me? Please don't do this. I'm a certified archivist and I just left the field for a tech job making double. The average salary in Texas is still low 40s for someone with a master's. This is bad advice. Government. It's difficult to get into politics because they deem you need experience. I simply think we need a few more young people in government to learn and give valuable input from our point of view. SQL developers. It's pretty easy to pick up the basics and go from there. Based on the conferences I've been to and my own workplace, the average age seems to be around 40, mostly men. Many software engineers pick it up as a side skill, but there are few of us who focus in this directly, in my experience. I know some younger people go for data science, and that's needed for sure, but the basics need to be covered as well. You can use this skill for positions like business analysts, report developers, data engineers, and eventually ETL developers. Patent law. A surprisingly large number of patent attorneys are baby boomers who graduated from engineering or pharmacy school during one of the recessions of the 1970s and went to law school because they couldn't find engineering or pharmacy jobs, and some went to law school to avoid going to Vietnam. What's a fact that's technically true but that nobody understands correctly? When people order a steak rare or very rare, the red fluid coming out of the meat is not actually blood. But somehow a lot of people think this is a packing fluid of some sort. It's a protein which happens to be red like blood. The real blood of the beef would be clotted at that point in time, so your rare steak is not actually bloody at all. That whole statistic about half of all marriages ending in divorce, it may be true, but a lot less than half of first marriages end in divorce. The thing is that there are repeat offenders driving up the statistic. The rate's actually between 35 to 40% of first marriages that end in divorce. The factors that really affect divorce rates are age, education level, and if you've previously been divorced and whether your parents are divorced. That women are experiencing more miscarriages than ever before, when really we've just developed pregnancy tests that can detect pregnancy sooner. What was just a few days late on their period for women 20 years ago is now actually a detectable pregnancy. It's the same with chest cancer. We've increased early detection, but women aren't surviving the cancer for longer, they're just living the same amount of time but knowing they have it for a longer amount of time. That George Washington had wooden teeth. Wooden in the context they said it in means uncomfortable and never meant made of wood. It means he had painful teeth. People think my lactose intolerance is an allergy. Nope, my body just doesn't produce the enzyme to digest lactose. By the same logic, I'm allergic to cyanide and most biological weapons. It is possible to make every correct move in a game and still lose. Whether glass is a liquid or glass is a solid. I'm a physicist who studied non-Newtonian fluids. The best answer is, it depends on what question you're asking. There are very excellent theoretical situations where it makes more sense to group it with liquids, like when you're talking about some of the rheological flow properties of the material. And there are other situations where it makes more sense to group it with solids, like when you want to know if your glass bowl will hold your soup. If you want to be even more accurate, you'll stop talking about it as being exclusively a solid or exclusively a liquid, since the idea that there are only 3 or 4 types of matter is overly simplistic. Your shaving foam is not exclusively a solid nor exclusively a liquid. It's complex. Your body isn't exclusively a solid or liquid either. It's complex. Negative reinforcement is actually the removal of aversive stimuli. To explain it further, positive reinforcement is the addition of pleasant stimuli to increase the likelihood of behaviors. Negative reinforcement is the removal of negative stimuli to increase likelihood of behaviors. Positive punishment is the addition of unpleasant stimuli to decrease likelihood of behavior. And negative punishment is the removal of pleasant stimuli to decrease likelihood of behavior. Okay, that's fascinating and it actually makes perfect sense. So negative reinforcement isn't trying to make a person or situation feel bad, it's working to try and improve an environment to positively impact someone or their output. The more you know. The fact that there are more slaves in the world today than at any prior time in history. In terms of absolute numbers, that is correct. Percentage-wise, though, there are far fewer. They're mostly in South Asia and Africa, though human trafficking, of course, occurs in nearly all low- and middle-income countries. That I don't have to agree with you in order to understand you. For whatever reason, political conversations always seem to forget this fact. I'm pretty sure the logic goes, if he doesn't agree with me, he must not understand me, because if he understood my point, he'd agree with my conclusion. If an intelligent species 67 million light-years away from us looks into their telescopes and sees Earth right now, they'll see dinosaurs. I like the Futurama version where a civilization 1,000 light years away watches our old TV shows. Assless chaps. It's redundant. Chaps are assless to begin with. Contraceptives. When it says the main male contraceptive is 97% effective, that doesn't mean every time you do the deed you have a 3% risk of getting pregnant. Those statistics are based on 100 couples a year. So if you do the deed regularly for a whole year, you have a 3% risk for that year. I just want to clarify that a lot of things change the effectiveness of contraceptives. As people have said, most pregnancies are due to user error. So learn how to properly use your protection and be as careful as possible. If you do this, the risk is much lower. Also, the 3% risk is not just from the Johnny failing or breaking, it's also affected by people who said that they've used them but forgot or just didn't use one. The moral of the story is no percentage of effectiveness is 100% accurate. Just be smart, be safe, and if possible, use 2 types of birth control. Birth control pills and rubbers both have around 99% effectiveness. Be safe, guys. Theories can only be falsified and never verified. However, this does not mean that every theory is equally valuable. The one lady who spilled hot coffee in her lap at McDonald's and then sued the company and won $2.9 million. So now everyone thinks it's easy as heck to sue and get big money. Lots of people think the court system and our laws are all messed up. I'm an attorney and I defend medium and small businesses against liability suits of all types. Let me tell you, people sue all the time over trivial stuff hoping to cash in, and most of the time they get their case dismissed, or they get a nominal settlement after they've invested tons of time and effort in their case and gotten exhausted and frustrated to the point where they just want the case to go away already. Also, most people don't know it, but the McDonald's restaurant where the injury happened screwed up by ignoring many complaints that their coffee was literally boiling and burning people. Plus, the lady who sued got really seriously injured and required extensive medical treatment. The kicker is, the judge reduced the jury's verdict from $2.9 million down to about $640K. McDonald's appealed this, and while the appeal was pending, the parties settled for a sum rumored to be about between $400 and $500K. Psychologist here. I think a really good one is that venting your frustrations makes you feel better. People take it for granted that talking about problems or distress makes you feel better without having a clue of why this works. People have no concept of why moving your vocal cords results in a reduction of psychological distress and anxiety. The answer is that when we discuss our anxiety, we're creating new memories that are more easily processed by the amygdala of the brain. Essentially, talking about your difficulties exposes you to them. The longer you have exposure to a stress-producing stimulus, the less your body reacts to it, hence you get a reduction in anxiety. Hakuna Matata. Yes, it does indeed mean no worries for the rest of your days, but the entire point of the movie is that it's a terrible mantra to live your life by. I don't know, yeah, Simba was using it to run away from his problems, but Timon and Pumbaa are making the best of their situations. Well, in a way, Timon and Pumbaa were running away too. That's part of the point. Because they'd been hurt when they were younger, they'd decided to basically abandon the world. There's a point in the movie where they have to make the decision between continuing that way or joining Simba and the rest of the world and creating a makeshift family instead of just a partnership. In doing that, they discover that they are genuine heroes. Pumbaa even beats the crap out of the hyenas all by himself. Gravity is almost the same in the ISS as where you are now. Which means they can walk up there, right? No. The Earth is pulling on the astronauts in orbit almost as hard as it pulls on you or me. The difference is that they're in constant freefall, so they're weightless. We can also be weightless, but only for short periods of time. For example, a bungee jumper or a parachute jumper would be approximately weightless until the cord started stretching or until the chute opened. So the reason they don't hit the ground in the ISS isn't that there's no gravitational force pulling them towards the Earth, but that their very fast sideways motion, over 7 kilometers a second, makes them miss the Earth. If the ISS stood still relative to the Earth, it would crash into the surface within minutes. The whole thing about lions not being very good climbers but being able to jump 36 feet. Just no. They can leap 36 feet, as in ford 36 feet. They don't jump 36 feet into the fricking sky. Do you know how terrifying that would be? The human race wouldn't have survived because we'd have all had heart attacks while still in Africa. 36 feet forward is still rather impressive, though the human long jump record is 29 feet, so that does bring it into perspective a bit. I will never not laugh at the idea of a lion soaring through the sky at the height of a 2-story building. Because my god, that would take the apex predator to a whole new level. Move over, Ridley Scott's Alien, there'd be a new top of the food chain. The Immaculate Conception is a Catholic doctrine about how Mary was conceived, not about how Jesus was conceived in Mary. The doctrine regarding the conception of Jesus is called the Incarnation. Chicago isn't significantly more windy than any other big metropolitan cities like Boston, New York City, or Los Angeles. The term Windy City to describe Chicago was first popularized to describe the political climate in the late 19th century. Don't Mess with Texas was actually a clean-up litter campaign and not a "We're American, don't mess with us" campaign. Texan here? I had no idea people didn't know this. It's a Texas littering sign. As a lover, am I going to be disappointed if I visit Virginia? Well, actually, yes. The slogan "Virginia is for lovers" was created by the Martin Agency, based out of Richmond, who do the commercials for many large companies like Geico and Oreo. The original slogan was going to be "Virginia is for blank lovers." The blank being whatever region was promoting itself, like Virginia is for history lovers for Williamsburg, or Virginia is for mountain lovers for Western Virginia, or Virginia is for beach lovers for the beach. The idea behind all of that was that whatever you loved to do, Virginia had it, but the test groups thought it would be too long, so they shortened it to Virginia is for lovers, and it's been misinterpreted ever since. I work as a software developer, but I don't know how to use all software applications that are available. Light is a wave and a particle. I've taken 2 years of university physics for engineers, over half of which was devoted to this concept, and while I understand that it's true, I still find it hard to comprehend. Life expectancy in the past being 30. The thing is, infant mortality rates were very, very high in a lot of eras, which brings the average age at time of death significantly lower. People definitely still lived till they were 70, and many people lived into their 50s. Dead babies are the cause of this misconception. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The right to free speech only protects you from legal repercussions. But don't you love it when people say something and scream bloody murder when they get social backlash, as if their freedom of speech should somehow protect them from your freedom of speech? A ridiculous extension of this is that people seem to think that freedom of speech equates to a right to be heard. I work at a newspaper. Every once in a while, someone will call in demanding we print something for them and citing their freedom of speech. I have a right for my story to be told. They never get it when we explain that we're not a state-run company and that it would be an infringement of our freedom of speech if we were forced to print something. Statistics as a whole and the way people can manipulate them to prove whatever they want. Yep, autism rates went up as more people got vaccinated, right? Well, so did the popularity of the internet, and the number of Starbucks worldwide, and the variety of gluten-free foods available. Wikipedia can be edited by anyone. That's true, but if you want your edits to be permanent, it's one hell of a lot harder. I freaking hate it when my teachers tell me it isn't a reliable resource. Do you see those citation numbers there, witch? That you only use 10% of your brain. People misinterpret this statement all of the time. At any given time, you're using around 15 to 25% of your brain. As in, those parts show some measurable electrical activity at any instance. However, 100% of your brain is used in total over time. Everyone always loves to point out how wrong it is, but they're just not understanding what the quote is trying to say. It's less, you have some awesome brain powers if you could unlock some hidden potential, Hollywood, and more, you don't have the energy or the need to keep more than a certain amount of your brain active at any given time. The US education system is terrible. It can't compete with systems like South Korea's. First off, I live in South Korea. Some of them go to high school at 7 and leave at midnight, and then go to private schools for a few hours before going home to sleep. Their younger generations also have horrible mental health statistics as a result. Second, the US education system isn't necessarily bad, it's that inner-city schools completely throw off the middle. The debate shouldn't be about the education system, but how we treat these low-income districts. Many people have told me I'm full of crap about Koreans going to school. Well, I've lived and worked here for 5 years in the education system, and I'm married to a Korean. She told me she typically slept for 3 hours at night during her senior year and went to school 7 days a week. That's about 10 years ago, and it's gotten worse since then. I posted on Facebook about how most of you don't believe me, and my friends who also live and work here are laughing their butts off. Evolution. People say they believe in evolution, but then say they don't understand why there are still monkeys. And they say monkeys too, not apes. Some people really need to pick up a book from time to time. 100% of all people die within 6 months of their birthday, except for some people born on February 29th. The Monty Hall problem. Sometimes I'm thinking about it and I get this brief feeling of eureka, but then it quickly fades and I wonder how the heck it makes sense. And then I start thinking about all the things I'd bring to Let's Make a Deal, like a hard-boiled egg and an abacus, and wool socks and a spatula and a deck of cards. I'd be ready for anything. And then I think about the time I was sick in grade 8 and I stayed home and ate a full bag of barbecue Fritos and then tickled my pickle to the Let's Make a Deal models. Okay, all that latter stuff aside, when the narrator first saw the Monty Hall problem on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he had to go on an intense Google to have it explained to him. I guess to try and explain it succinctly, it makes sense if there are more doors. If you have a choice between your initial door or all of the remaining 5 doors, you'd pick the remaining ones, right? And once Monty Hall has opened 4 of those 5 doors, you're essentially choosing the section that contains the remaining probability outside the first door you chose. Honestly, just go and look at some diagrams. I'm aware that what I'm saying sounds just as confusing. There are so many people on Reddit that our inside jokes aren't really between a small group of people. A meme is not necessarily an animal advice-style image with text slapped on it. A meme is a cultural phenomenon that becomes viral. It can be an image, a saying, an idea, a joke, or anything really. 9 out of 10 times on Reddit, people are misusing the term. Almost all things can gain density when shifting from liquid to solid, but frozen water floats on liquid water. Now, I realize that most people who've gone through the modern education system are more likely to have a grasp of the crystal structure of water, but I also know that the general population doesn't have a solid grasp on the concept. Sure, people know that ice floats, but do they know why water is so weird? Do they know that at 4 degrees Celsius it's more dense than at 2 degrees or 6 degrees? I doubt it. Occam's razor doesn't say that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. It says that we shouldn't add unnecessary complexity to an explanation when a simpler one is sufficient. Meaning, you still need an explanation capable of fully explaining something, even if the explanation is complex. Winnie the Pooh and Jack the Ripper have the same middle name. Coincidence? I think not. You don't get colds from being cold. Murphy's Law stating that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. For those who may still understand it wrong, Murphy's Law is most easily explained from a programming or product design point of view. It states that you can't leave loose ends that could mess up your product that have a minutely small chance of happening and just bank on them not happening. If there's a way for your program or product to be messed up by your hundreds of thousands of consumers, it will happen. So you have to fix it. The customer is always right doesn't mean that in every argument or problem the customer is always right. The phrase is in regards to the market, and the customer is right in determining the demand the market must in turn supply. That women in the USA are paid 80% of what men earn. A lot of people still misinterpret this statistic as meaning that similarly qualified women are paid 20% less than men for doing the same job. The 80% figure is actually based on aggregate wage data. In short, it compares all of the money earned by women in all jobs to all of the money earned by men in all jobs. There certainly is a persistent wage gap between women and men, but it's more like 5%. Shaving with a razor does not make your hair grow faster or thicker. Well, that's not so much something people misunderstand, it's just something people are wrong about. That 0.9 reoccurring is equal to 1. Not approximately, but rigorously 1. That evolution is the survival of the fittest. Fittest for that particular environment and set of circumstances, not necessarily advantageous of all environments and circumstances. Blood is thicker than water. It means that those who've shed blood together, like soldiers, form a stronger bond than that shared by brothers, who shared the waters of the womb. It's not even just soldiers, it essentially means that the bonds you choose to form, the blood of the bond, are stronger than the bonds you're born into, the water of the womb. Pretty much all the facts involved in the Malaysia Flight 370 situation. Journalists try and simplify things like how the ping locator works, and then people read it and think they know how things work. Karma. Especially in the West, people talk about karma as if it's a causal mechanism that makes good things happen to good people and bad things to bad people. That's not what it is. Nothing can happen because of karma. Karma is an observation, not a mechanism. Karma literally just means action. As a philosophical principle, it simply refers to the fact that your actions have consequences. Treating people well generally makes them treat you well. Harming people earns you enemies. There are no cosmic forces at work here, it's just people cooperating and competing. God damn it, Todd, yet another thing you messed up in Fallout. Go and think about what you've done in your mansion with your millions of dollars. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle. The simplest explanation of it, the act of observing a particle in fact changes it, has been so fricking perverted by some philosophers and almost all practitioners of holistic medicine, it's sickening. The uncertainty principle has been frequently confused with the observer effect, evidently even by its originator, Werner Heisenberg. The uncertainty principle in its standard form actually describes how precisely we may measure the position and momentum of a particle at the same time. If we increase the precision in measuring one quantity, we are forced to lose precision in measuring the other. An alternative version of the uncertainty principle, more in the spirit of an observer effect, fully accounts for the disturbance the observer has on a system and the error incurred, although this is not how the term uncertainty principle is most commonly used in practice. Q-tips aren't meant for your damn ears. Correlation does not imply causation. This phrase should be written in stone in every school of the universe. Nobody getting that, especially in the media, is really something that can lead people to make very stupid choices. That all words are made-up words. All words are created by humans, yes, but they also have an agreed meaning in the community. Made up as in nonsense words have no agreed meaning in the community and often bear little resemblance to any pre-existing words in the speaker's native language. That the fricking saying is, I couldn't care less. God damn it, America. The universe is expanding, but very few understand that it's happening at an accelerating rate, and nobody understands why. ADHD is a real disability, and it's also overdiagnosed. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The Pledge of Allegiance didn't have "under God" until the Red Scare in 1954. America was founded on the principle of religious freedom, not as a Christian nation. I live in the Bible Belt, so this is misunderstood by just about everybody down here. That hot water can freeze faster than cold water. Right, so for the most part, cold water is going to freeze faster, but under certain circumstances, hot can freeze quicker. It's not scientifically clear why it does, and the one explanation that makes the most sense to me is that colder water can contain more dissolved gases. More dissolved gases can change the convection of the water, and higher convection can transfer heat and spread ice crystals faster. So, hot water wouldn't just instantly freeze faster than cold if they're in the same temperature without some phenomenon happening, just the same as it takes more effort to stop a train going 200 miles per hour than one going 30 miles per hour unless something helps it slow down. And any explanation someone gives is not scientifically accepted because no one's had a theoretical explanation that holds up experimentally, and vice versa, so pick your poison, I guess. What was the incident at your workplace? When I was 17, I worked the egg grill at a big university cafeteria. The grease, oil, and residue from cooking thousands of eggs each weekend would fall into a channel and drain into a removable metal trap about as long as my leg. Each night, we'd remove the trap, dump it, and put it back again. Sometimes we'd rinse it too. Anyway, as a new employee, I was overly eager to please everyone. I cleaned the trap with scalding hot water and tried to get it as clean as possible. That's when I noticed the trap felt heavier than it ought to be. It was only partially filling up, because at least 2/3 of it was filled with some sort of, blockage. So I started banging the trap. Hard. I kept flushing the top third with hot water and slamming the trap against the inside of a big garbage pail. Nothing was happening. I keep doing this over and over because little tiny pieces of congealed egg, and God knows what else, were breaking loose. Finally, I slam it once more, really hard, this time against the floor. Whatever was blocking the trap broke free, and this horrendous, frickin' grey and black sludge comes pouring out all over the kitchen. Words cannot possibly fricking describe it. The smell was like a living, breathing thing. A rancid mixture of purified egg, bacon grease, rotting flesh, and whatever the hell else was in there. It radiated instantly and irreversibly outward, slamming everyone in the kitchen like a punch to the face. So I heaved my guts up first. It wasn't even a question. I don't even think my mind fully realized what had happened. I was just blowing chunks out all over the floor in front of me. I dropped the grease trap and turned to run, and 3 other employees were also throwing up, 2 of them into Rubbermaid pails and 1 of them into the sink where he was washing dishes. People started running for the exits. That's what I remember most. This was at SUNY Stony Brook, on Long Island, and the Kelly cafeteria had about 30 plus people working back there at any given time. We all met outside the parking lot, gasping for air, trying to figure out what to do. No one knew what had happened down there except for me, and they only knew something horrible had happened. When I told them I'd just cleaned the grease trap, they all looked at me horrified. "Nobody cleans that thing, we just dump it," they cried. "We haven't cleaned that thing in frickin' years." Needless to say, I was in charge of the cleanup. It involved a crap ton of bleach, several trips, and a steam hose. I found out a few more people chucked up in the outer areas too, out by the serving lines. One girl threw up into the bowl of salad she was chopping. Anyway, that's my story. Nothing will ever come close to that smell in my entire life, and from that I derive a little bit of comfort. As absolutely vile as all of this is, I freaking love the idea of cleaning out an entire venue with one act of slightly overzealous diligence at your job. And your old boss can thank their lucky stars that this seems to have happened in a time when your local health inspector was less diligent than the teens flipping the food. This reminds me of my old boss's story of starting work at a locally well-known restaurant. He had taken the head chef opening as he was working on getting the funds to open his own restaurant and needed something to tide him over. First day, everything goes without trouble. Then at the end of the night, they start cleaning down the kitchen. He grabs a screwdriver and goes to dismantle the meat slicer so the blade can be cleaned, and someone tells him not to bother. Don't bother to clean the meat slicer? For real? He ignores them, starts taking the blade off, and everyone takes a step back before a putrid cloud of stank starts emanating from the 2 or more years' worth of rotten meat and cheese that had gotten stuck there. During his time there, the cleanliness standards were raised massively by him. But after he'd left and opened his restaurant, we had a chef join us from the other place, and he reported it to have gone to crap again since the boss left. Used to work in a cinema, there was a drunk guy being pretty loud and aggressive. There was a big guy sat in front of him who got a little annoyed. That big guy dragged him out of the screening. I think him and his wife left afterwards and demanded a refund. I work at a boarding kennel, and one day one of the dogs got out. It rarely happens, but it does happen occasionally. We all chased this dog for about an hour until they sent me back to the kennel in case someone showed up there while they were trying to capture it. I go back and I see about 30 minutes later that there's a traffic jam on the highway and there's a camera showing 3 people chasing a dog there. It was something straight out of the cartoons. All that was missing was the yakety sax music. Last week, someone accidentally sent an email intended for like 4 people to 8,800 people, pretty much the entire building. This triggered tons of people replying saying, "This isn't for me, take me off this email," which then evolved into tons of people emailing, "Quit replying all, everyone," which then turned into people sending memes making fun of the entire ordeal. In about an hour, I received 216 emails. 216 emails to 8,800 people is something like 1.9 million emails, not including actual work emails outside of this. All of this our email server had to process in an hour. A guy named Greg was one of the first to respond to the email explosion, and he had this little picture icon thing of a Jeep in his email signature, which consequently was on nearly every email from then on. It was after the first 150 emails or so, people were getting pretty agitated and still screaming to stop replying to all, when some brave soul replied all, commenting by saying, "Sweet Jeep, Greg." It was the freaking funniest email of all, and I completely lost it at my desk. To anyone who works at Chrysler Tech Center, sweet Jeep, Greg. One of the vending machines in work malfunctioned and set all of the prices to 0. People formed an orderly queue to loot the F out of it, and it was empty in less than 15 minutes. I work at a hotel, and my boss wasn't letting anyone talk about the fact that our graveyard clerk was fired for being caught on camera with a working girl in my boss's office. He's telling everyone he quit for another job. At a vet's office after closing, 2 male techs decided to take cushions off a couch, hold them out in front of their bodies, and then run at each other full force. Now, one is an average 180-pound man, the other is just under 400 pounds. The little guy goes flying and splits his forehead open on the wall corner. Now we have a work injury that needs to be reported unless he wants to foot the bill for obviously needed sutures. I don't remember what they decided or if they made up a story for workers' comp. We don't speak of it. There had been a few, but the one that sticks in my mind was when the HR department had crap rained upon them. There had been warning signs. The toilets on our floor took longer and longer to drain, but nobody thought about mentioning this to the facilities crew. Some kind of blockage had occurred in our plumbing system, however we were unaware of the consequences this would have. I didn't see it all, but apparently it started with the smell of number 2, then a brown drip, drip, drip from the ceiling. Shortly followed by a torrent which ran along the office, coating 5 PCs and 2 people in their colleagues' crap. I turned up to see another member of HR holding a massive bin while a steady stream of light brown liquid poured out of the ceiling and filled it up. I gave them a wave and just went upstairs to our office. I was talking to one of HR about this event, as it's legendary, and she said, "I'll never forget that. It was my first day." Warehouse here, a guy in a hurry decided he'd climb 3 pallets high to grab a case instead of bringing the pallet down with a forklift. Well, he slipped and bounced on the concrete floor. Now, whenever someone does something unsafe, we call it bouncing. Where's Bob? Oh, he's in the overflow aisle bouncing around. The guy survived, but he's on permanent disability. Oh, I'll just make a list. The one time our manager punched a pregnant woman. The time our manager was arrested for tackling a guest. The time our manager was accused of lighting property of a foe on fire. And the 4 times our married manager slept with a much younger employee. Take note, these were all different managers. I don't know whether to be relieved that this wasn't the same guy, because on the one hand, if you do any of these things, obviously you need to go. But on the other hand, the negligence of someone who'd let a staff member do all of these things would be epic, even for the restaurant industry. I work for Autoliv, a major manufacturer of automobile safety devices, primarily airbags. We have a lot of on-site recycling facilities and processes, one of which takes the fired igniters out of used airbags to be recycled for parts, but first has to be cooked in a giant furnace to set off any remaining unfired explosives. We also do this for competitors to help them save money and to make us money. Long story short, we received some igniters we don't normally see or process. They ended up going off while being carried to the oven, setting off a chain reaction and blowing a hole in the side of the building. Only one guy was injured with minor burns and temporary hearing loss. I was working down the hill in another building about a quarter mile away, and it sounded like a jet breaking the sound barrier right overhead, twice in less than a second. The cause was the igniter they were not used to handling being more sensitive. The guy was walking with a tray full and one went off, boom. I worked at a Dairy Queen in high school, and one day when I wasn't working, the crew decided to initiate a new guy by making him go south of the border on a realistic male member, complete with the stones made of soft serve. They took him into the back, away from the cameras, to do it, but he left a note for the owner to check the cams the next day so he could see them making the ding-dong out of ice cream and taking him to the back. The entire shift, except for the victim, was fired the next day for allowing it to happen. Needless to say, I'm glad I wasn't working that night. I worked at a hospital, and it was pretty much that a group email was sent out to see what people wanted for lunch. It was pretty much the entire floor. But somehow one of the guys replied but had copied in a conversation he was having with a girl he was doing the deed with, which revealed she was potentially pregnant. She worked on the same floor. I was the first one to notice and pointed it out to him. He frantically went from desk to desk asking that they please delete it. This one guy cranking it in the washroom, but not in the toilet stall. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A while back, I apprenticed at a small furniture workshop for a few months. The total number of employees was 4. The boss/head woodworker, myself, a night shift finishing pro who I'd never met, and the general laborer. The entire workshop was cluttered on a good day and downright treacherous on a bad one, but somehow things got done. One day we were rolling out the fruit of 2 weeks of hard work. A complete kitchen set in rich natural rosewood, kind of a traditional Asian aesthetic kind of thing. Lots of delicate little crossbeams that I'd had to hand sand one by one. We wrap individual segments in moving blankets and had them ready for loading into the company truck. And then disaster strikes. I hear the sounds of argument from inside the workshop, and the general laborer comes rushing out. I only learned the details later, but apparently our boy was good friends with the Colombian dancing dust and got caught snorting a bump right off one of the workbenches. The boss tells him to get his stuff and get out immediately, which sends him into a frothing rage. He grabs a sledgehammer and goes to town on the kitchen pieces, annihilating 2 weeks and several $1,000s worth of work. This is when I learned an important lesson. Never mess with a man's creations, especially if they put bread on his table. The boss threw a heavy spanner in the newly unemployed snowhead's face, knocking him the heck out. That was around the time I realized woodworking might not be for me after all. I only stayed around long enough to finish remaking the kitchen set and for the boss to find a replacement for me. Well, that was that one day one of the network guys was chatting up one of the female ops in the data center. He put his hand out to lean on a post and hit the emergency power cutoff switch. No, we didn't have a cover on it at the time. The data center goes dark. Attempts to turn power back on and fried the UPS. 8 hours later, the UPS was bypassed and we got systems back up and running. I used to work at McDonald's, and one time we had a girl cleaning above the deep frying vats with a cloth. There were lots of oil splashes up into the stainless steel. Anyway, she dropped the cloth into the vat and without thinking reached in and grabbed it. She deep fried her hand and now has permanent scarring and nerve damage. For those wondering, the skin kind of fell off, like when a snake sheds its skin, leaving raw red patches all over her hand. Someone, still unidentified, poisoned a female co-worker's soda with bleach and some still unidentified substance. She survived and is fine, but someone who I work with tried to kill a co-worker. Did she stay at that workplace? Because I really hope that either there were massive changes at that place or that she was moved to from-home work, because it's just crazy. What kind of compensation can you get from your co-worker trying to poison you? And what do you do if you don't know who did it? By golly, working retail, we've got quite a few of them just at our store alone. Some of the short versions are as follows. One of the old supervisors, before I started working there, had a thing for one of the managers. It got to the point where everyone knew and it got extremely weird and creepy. After this going on for a bit and him being rejected once, the manager moved out to another state to work for another one of the stores. This guy followed her to the next state. Followed her, entered her car, shanked her and threw her body in the field and then stole the car. He was caught very shortly after. Another time, there was a guy in the first week I started working there that was just not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He wasn't a bad guy, just a tad sleazy and not bright. So, one day his girlfriend asks him if he wants to go swimming because she was going very shortly. He was not even midway through the shift at this point, and in his mind he begins thinking of what he can do to go home. Instead of just saying he isn't feeling well or finishing the gosh darn shift, he thinks, hey, maybe if I line the bathroom in toilet paper and light it up, I can go home. So that's what he does. He lights the bathroom on fire. The alarm goes off, all the employees and customers are confused at this point and start to leave. Then our almighty Lord and Savior store manager comes and tells everyone it's a freaking drill and it's okay, while the bathroom is on fire, and he just proceeds to turn off the alarm. Well, when the fire and police departments start showing up, he gets torn a new butthole by the fire marshal, and then after a quick look on the cameras, lo and behold, Mr. Poolgoer was termed on the spot. Then there was the sad one. There's not much to it, again it was before my time, but an employee was super depressed and wanted to end things, so he decided the best place to go would be the stall in the men's bathroom. He didn't succeed though and has now thankfully gotten some help. Then there was the phantom crapper. After store hours, one of our janitors was going through the trash again. They normally clean them once all the customers are gone and once more before leaving. So this janitor smelled something a little odd. After taking the garbage out of the pail, right at the top are a pair of crappy boxers. He cleans it up and continues cleaning. At the end of the night, when we have our little daily meeting, after myself and the manager are done speaking, the janitor says, "Oh, by the way, one of you left your poopy pants down my garbage pail." We all laugh a bit and he explains that after we closed, someone had cramped themselves, tossed the underwear in, and was running around commando. Nobody ever fessed up. Then came the incident on the most wonderful time of the year. Two of our Christmas associates had a problem with each other outside of work before their hiring. After working together for a bit, the two made this apparent. Snarky remarks here and fiery glares there. One day, the two went on their break together. They got into an argument in the break room, and after getting into it a bit, one of them took out pepper spray and unloaded on the other employee. We found out after she came out screaming. Worked at a big warehouse for an electronics wholesaler. Some kids trespassed and got trapped in a container because the mechanism broke when they shut the door. They were only in it for 5 or 6 hours. They got in around midnight. The first shift workers came in around 6 a.m. But the parents were furious and the management exploded over the kids managing to get past the security guards. The deputy manager exacerbated things by thinking it was funny and joking that the kids nearly got shipped off to Taiwan or something. The parents didn't see the funny side of that. I don't know if the parents ever followed through on threats to sue, But I do know the guards had a lot more rules to follow, and empty containers had their locks locked while open, if that makes sense, so the doors couldn't physically shut. Bonus, it later turned out that the mechanism wasn't even broken, the kids just weren't thinking straight and were turning the bolt the wrong way. They could have left at any time. I was controlling at an adult club where people take off their clothes for money. The controller is the person who sits there while you get a dance to make sure nobody's breaking the law. We had the waitress come up and tell us that someone downstairs was looking for a guy who had just booked one of the dances for an hour. I assumed it was one of his mates, so I dismissed it with, "Tell his friend he can hold his own eggplant for an hour." When the waitress goes, it's his wife. She says they had a flight to be on and she found him when she checked where his credit card had been used. I damn near crapped myself laughing, and we went to get the unfortunate patron. He was crowing, "Oh no, I'm single, I don't have a wife," on, until he walked downstairs and saw her and muttered, "Oh," and walked out with her with his tail between his legs. Kudos to the wife, she was trying so hard not to lose her crap at the staff and the dancer, I'll bet he got fricking slaughtered later. I spent over a year in those clubs, and it was the only angry partner incident ever. One office affair got leaked to the media, and the husband of the woman involved accused the man involved of coercing or forcing the wife into doing the deed. I used to work at an armored car company near Boston. We had an inside job one day. It was super frickin' intense until we pieced together what had happened. So here goes. The truck pulls up to the normal stop. The driver's cousin gets on the truck. The truck drives around to Lawrence, a crappy town north of Boston, for 45 minutes and stops at its normal stop to pick up more money. The truck then drives to the cousin's house. The cousin makes 2 trips, bringing duffel bags into his house. The truck drives away and finishes another hour of its route. 2 hours later, pulls up to Lawrence Police Station to report robbery that happened 2 hours and 5 miles ago. Said they were robbed by a 6.5-foot Asian man. 2 hours after arrival at the police station, driver and partner are under arrest. Well played, men. One of my mates works at a fish store. Somebody was sacked for punching a catfish. Wait, an aquatic bottom feeder or a date who showed up looking nothing like their picture? And here's another dad joke that 2 commenters set up. Why would someone punch a fish? Because you have to batter catfish before you fry them, silly. Guy gets a DUI one night. In the army, well, in my unit, this means his chain of command all the way up to the company goes to see the brigade sergeant major. This isn't really a rare occurrence, but if you get a DUI, you're more or less regarded as a crap bag and you're gonna get kicked out. Fast forward a few months, the guy's separation paperwork is close to done and he should be out soon. We have a training rotation across the country coming up and the commander needs a driver. We don't have enough bodies, so the commander works out a deal to save him from the separation if he'll drive for him in the training exercise. The deal is done. The guy's a fairly seasoned soldier and has combat deployment under him and does really well at the exercise. Even gets an award and people have changed their mind on him. The weekend after getting back from the training exercise, the guy drives drunk around post, drifting and drag racing and doing dumb crap in his Mustang. He loses control and drives through a fence and hits a particularly expensive military vehicle. The military police are called and arrive at the scene. They try and arrest him, but he sucker punches one in the jaw, breaking the guy's jaw and his hand. Another MP tackles him and he goes to jail. Same situation as the first paragraph happens again, and on Sunday night he's released from jail and he's told to show up Monday morning. He does not show up on Monday morning. His leadership goes to his barracks room. The place is ransacked. The guy went AWOL. They wait a few days. The guy updates his Facebook with his new location and pictures of him. This goes on for a couple of months. The guy's stepmother drives him from Kentucky to Wyoming, where his father is going to sneak him into Canada. The father is drunk and can't drive and refuses to help at all. Stepmother starts fighting the father. Cops get called to the house. Guy goes to hide in the house. Cops defuse the domestic situation and take the father into the house. They hear rustling in the attic and the guy falls through the ceiling right in front of the cops. Last I heard, he's doing time at a military jail somewhere. What terrible fact did you not realize about your spouse until after you married them? My cousin found out her fiancé was cheating on her the night before the wedding. His response was, "This is how the world works, grow up." The only person she told was my sister, and she was too scared to cancel anything the day of. My sister didn't tell me until we'd left the area, probably a wise choice. I have a temper and the buff fiancé would probably have kicked my butt, so nobody could do anything. The marriage, thank God, only lasted about 2 months or so. The best part about it was my near-comatose grandmother hearing about it, getting out of her chair and saying, "I'm gonna kill that son of a witch." Got married to the wrong person when I was way too naive and inexperienced. Found out after we'd got divorced that he'd been doing the deed with his stepmom since he was 15. My ex-wife was bipolar with tendencies towards not wanting to be alive anymore. When we fought, it got progressively worse until she started threatening to delete herself over just about anything. I divorced her 4 years ago. She finally went through with her threats a few years after that. I feel a tremendous amount of guilt, even though I might not have been able to change what seemed like the inevitable. As unenthusiastic as he was about doing the deed, he hated himself enough to screw anyone else who'd tell him he was a great guy. He was bad with money. Imagine getting your paycheck, spending $60 on green herb, then buying a Nintendo Wii, maybe an Xbox, some games, not used, new games, maybe even a game that comes with night vision goggles. Then spending more money on yourself because, I work hard, I deserve to enjoy my paycheck. Imagine being 10 months behind on rent with your cable and cell phone turned off, being over $1,000 in debt to the gas and electric companies respectively. Do that for over a decade, never getting better. My rent has been on time for over a year now, my car payment is on time, my bills are paid and I can sleep at night. I have hardly any money left over, but I don't care, it's better this way. She has horrible hygiene habits, particularly oral hygiene. It's continued to deteriorate over the years. FML. As a recently married person, these comments are really depressing and I need to leave now. I was going to post something about how my wife leaves dirty dishes around and doesn't clean up after herself, but now I think I'm just going to go give her a hug. Perspective is one hell of a thing, isn't it? Yeah, maybe I need to come back and look at this when I think that my partner has sent me one too many cat stickers at any given moment. He was a lying, lazy, selfish slob who wanted a housekeeper and breadwinner combo. We didn't have the opportunity to live together before we got married. I didn't get to meet his family. He pretended to like everything I liked, and he wooed me with beautiful songs. He dropped all pretense after we married. He wanted to quit work so he could, quote, work on his music. Dude, you're good, but not that good, or that motivated. He wanted 2 bedrooms. Intimacy? I'll just go to your room and do my business. Business? Frick you, I'm out of here. In short, I fell for a honey-voiced pretender. You know, while we were dating, she seemed to be an industrious, independent woman. Now, all she wants to do is quit her job so she can sit at home, clean and cook for maybe an hour a day, and read raunchy vampire novels. Seriously. While I feel your pain, I'm honestly more angry about raunchy vampire novels being a genre these days. I keep asking my girlfriend if I can do this. She refuses me too. Those novels don't read themselves, you know. My wife would probably say that it was my substance addiction. I hid it from her, and then about a year into our marriage, she found out. It was pretty messed up of me to hide something like that from her. She stayed with me when she could have left. We're as happy as we've ever been now, and I'm not living a lie anymore. Not me, but my brother. He and his ex-wife were living with her parents, trying to save money to buy a house. After 6 years or so, they should have had about 80 grand in the bank account that she had controlled. He looked one day and there was 7 grand in there. She was a closet gambler and peed away about 73 grand. He didn't even know their wedding was paid on credit cards. Of course, he knows now that he was not very smart to blindly trust her with their savings like that, and yes, they are divorced now. That she was way too immature to deal with real-life issues because she'd never had to deal with things on her own. She went from relying on her parents to working a dead-end job, eventually quitting that one too, and then to relying on me. The first 6 years were great, then crap hit the fan. It all went downhill from there. Well, my wife liked sausages. Lots of sausages. Sausages that didn't belong to me. Damn, this blew up. Just like those members in her face. Long story short, I was a bit of a doormat. She cheated on me about 8 times. Yes, 8. I just felt like I needed her. After I got over her leaving, I felt frickin' fabulous. I met my fiancé and I've never felt this happy before. So the story had a happy ending. Just like every guy my ex runs into gets. That despite him seeming like a modern man when I met him, washing his share of the dishes and cooking, and apparently liking me for being a non-traditional, non-housewifely woman, that was just his courtship personality. As soon as we got married and bought an apartment, we'd lived together for a year before marriage, he suddenly revealed that he expected me to do far more of the housework than him, although we both worked the same hours, and he'd bully me into accepting all of his decisions about everything, and get angry if I ever disagreed with him. When I finally left him, he said, "How can you not be happy with me? I never hit you," which to me kind of said it all. My husband started out with the fantasy of wife swapping. We talked about it often. I wasn't really into it, but he persisted. He told me I was boring and we needed to spice things up. He went on websites and chatted up other couples. Fast forward a couple of years, he put undressed pictures of me on AFF, used my real name, chatted up guys all the time telling me that I was good in bed, even though I was, quote, too curvy. This went on and I had zero self-confidence left. I'm finally leaving him, but the only reason I'm still alive is that I have a son, and I don't want him to grow up thinking about women the way his father does. My wife and I got married after knowing each other for 5 months. I found out pretty quick that she was insanely jealous. I literally couldn't turn my head without her coming unglued. It didn't help that I was something of a pig. The good news is we worked it out and are still happily married almost 39 years now. She is still the most beautiful woman I've ever met and is my best friend as well as my wife. 3 kids and 7 grandkids as well. People can change if you give them the chance. It kind of feels as though his wife came into the room at the end of his first paragraph. When my brother married, he discovered that my sister-in-law likes to clean. A lot. She found out that my brother is extremely messy and is grouchy all the time, not just when he's hungry. But they're actually happy. Now she's a little bit less obsessed with cleaning everything, and he is much cleaner. That he has severe anger issues and goes all Jekyll and Hyde on me regularly. I've told him that he needs to seek help or we'll need to go to counseling together, and he's just refused both. I'm a mental health nurse, but he needs hardcore therapy beyond our 4 walls. This morning, he woke up because the cat was scratching the carpet. He proceeded to yell at me for 30 minutes, stomp around the house searching for the cat so he can skin her and hang her from a tree. I asked him several times to stop yelling. He said that I should be as upset as he is. And I wasn't. He put his ring on the dresser and is now sleeping downstairs. He wanted my rings back. They're sitting on the dresser next to his. The next move is his. I've told him his anger would be the end of us, and it seems like he's made his choice. Update, I wrote him a letter asking him to spend the day thinking about life without me. He called me and told me to give him his effing ring back. The last lines of my letter were, "I love you, I want to give you your ring back." Now he tells me that if I don't declaw the cat, then we're over. The cat is 9 years old. I think declawing is inhumane, and he knows that. I sarcastically responded, "You might as well just put her down." He said that was a good idea. I told him it's a terrible idea, and his values are messed up. Now I'm at work, and this will be a long day. In case any people were wondering how this relationship turned out, the username is Married Too Soon. I tried to dig up some confirmation on whether this meant they'd finally finished things with their partner, but there was no solid confirmation outside the name. Well, I didn't marry too soon, but definitely too young and immature. He was as well. X and I married at 25. Life got tricky at 30 with our first kid. He had been the driving force behind having kids, but didn't like how it changed his lifestyle. Second kid at 32. That kid was sadly born very sick and nearly didn't make it. My partner couldn't cope, and started having an affair with a woman at work. Within 18 months, he'd run off with her. He left me holding the bag with a disabled kid. He married that woman from work, and he's finally grown up now at the age of 46. They have an adopted kid, but also a full-time nanny and tons of household help and money. They don't have the daily life stresses we'd had. He's trying to be involved with our kids, but he's mostly just Uncle Daddy and buys them stuff. I'd have to say that I found out too late that I have anger issues I developed from the way my parents raised me, but thanks to my significant other, they're nearly gone. He was violent and controlling and just overall fricking insane. Like throwing a hissy fit in the grocery store because I wouldn't buy him stuff to make deluxe iced tea. Look, I wouldn't mind buying stuff to make iced tea, but he got it in his mind that he was going to make these incredible iced tea concoctions with gourmet tea bags, and he wanted $30 worth of the bags. I suggested he just get the normal stuff and he flipped out. I was the only one working, so he didn't have the money for it anyway. But he flipped out so hard and I bought it for him, and he tried making these tea creations and ended up hating them and throwing them all out. It's just one of those examples that stuck out to me. We had a similar situation when he apparently needed a chimney and he broke the damn thing, making a fire and getting drunk with his friends within the week. Now I look back and I should have seen the warning signs, but you never think your husband is going to slam you on the kitchen floor for disagreement over a chicken recipe. He also slept with one of my friends, although I never confronted either of them about it, because I didn't even give a crap and was just tired of it all by that point. Then he left me and it was freaking awesome. It was actually the nicest thing he's ever done for me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My ex and I got married when I was 19 and she was 18. She used procreation for no other purpose than as an acquisition tool. She never enjoyed it, in her words. When I could no longer give her anything new, she used it with other guys for the same purpose. She had a crap job, yet somehow managed to buy new clothes and purses, even a car. I was extraordinarily naive, I kinda still am, so I just figured they paid her well. Turns out I didn't know what they were paying her for. I ended up becoming a sort of zombie. Getting up, going to work, bringing back paychecks and giving them to her. We were married for 7 years and I only actually took one vacation, which was a week, that entire time. The main reason I never noticed her cheating on me was that I wasn't there. I was always at work. 1997 was a lost year for me. I don't remember anything that happened that year at all. I lost my 20s. While my younger work friends were going out to clubs, to concerts, to festivals, I was working. I was constantly trying to make our lives better because I thought cash would do it. I was never actually single until after my divorce, when I was broke and single, which meant I was still unable to enjoy those things, and I was 28 when it was finalized. In short, I was very naive, and naive people shouldn't get married. It's bad for them. You know what? I don't think I want to get married. Thanks, everyone. My wife had never eaten an orange. Man, I want to punch my mother-in-law sometimes for that crap. From my married best friend, that there were other women willing to do the deed with him. To clarify, he's a good guy and he's never cheated. He just wonders if he settled too early by marrying his first and not ever being with another woman. We'll go out to a bar and a girl will start talking to him, they'll hit it off, and then I can absolutely see him deflate when he has to wish them goodnight or the conversation requires him to be honest about his marital status. I think, like a lot of guys that settled down early and after only 1 or 2 girls, he just wonders what it would be like to have done it differently. I bet when you're married it's a lot easier to talk to and meet other women. Like they see the ring and automatically assume that you're just being nice or friendly and you're not some creep. Am I wrong in that thinking? Well, it's true. If an old guy is talking to me and getting too friendly, I get creeped out. But if he has a wedding ring, somehow I assume he has kids and his friendliness is purely paternal, so I let my guard down. It's naive and it's gone against me sometimes, but that's the way it works. I don't know that we got married too soon. We'd been living together for 4 years, and so far we've been married for nearly 14. He presented himself as someone with goals, as someone who expected to make some money. I never expected nor wanted him to be the sole earner, but he earns literally nothing and has never bought in much. No big deal, really. We do have fun, we do the deed a lot, and we generally get along. The problem is we now have children, and he still refuses to work outside the home. In fact, since the children have been born, he's more stubborn than ever. Saying his dad was always off on business trips, but he's going to be here with his kids. The problem with this is that I only make $11 and some change an hour. I have 2 little preschool-age kids. He quit his job after the first one was born, and due to me being laid off mid-pregnancy, I'd switched to his health insurance. So that was gone. So I basically work, sometimes even overtime if I can get it, and have to scrounge for SNAP and Medicaid, which I personally find quite humiliating. There's rarely ever dinner ready when I get home, the house is a mess, and he's always yelling at the kids. Yelling at me. Breaking stuff when he's mad. He kicked 2 holes in a door, put a hole in one wall, and ripped the trim off the corner of one wall so far. He's often yelling and literally crying with tears that no one appreciates him. We put the kids to bed around 8 p.m. and he yells at them to go back to sleep when they wake up at 8:30 in the morning. That's 12 frickin' hours. They don't need to sleep anymore. He stays up until 4 a.m. playing video games, then wants everyone to have sympathy and walk around on eggshells because he's tired. Go the frick to bed earlier or suck it up in the morning and stop acting like a gosh darn toddler. You have actual toddlers to take care of. In short, I married a childish man who behaves like a toddler. Presented himself as peaceful, mature, calm, and responsible. Isn't. Okay, yet another profile with very few updates on how things ended up after this pretty grim state of affairs. I will say that this man does not sound like he's doing well mentally, and that I would suspect that this is down to a lot more than him just being lazy. But you and the kids do deserve someone who contributes better than that and doesn't actively stop you from enjoying your lives. He's a completely different person around his very religious family. He talks down about me to his family to make himself look better. He hired his friend to ask my friends about any dirt they had on me. He lies, like a lot. He has anger issues. He's never physically hurt me, he's just been angry. Since his mother cleaned up after him, he doesn't do it himself, even now. He is super self-conscious. He cries easily, he hates me asking questions about his religion, and gets angry when I do. He talks way too much. He acts dumb when he's confronted about things. He spends money we don't have on things we don't need. He snores, although that's a new development. He puts cigarette butts in his pocket and never empties them when the laundry is done, leaving a wonderful smell that makes the clothes need to be re-washed again. He doesn't see the weirdness in having a conversation with anyone and everyone, everywhere, about things that do not need to be said to strangers. Like, I really don't think this random person standing behind us at Walmart gives a flying F about how you were raised and how many centimeters dilated I am when I was pregnant. Damn, why didn't I wait a bit longer? I will say that he's become a great dad. He wasn't at first. He'll admit that himself to people if the conversation comes up. He was jealous of all the attention my daughter was getting with the co-sleeping, feeding, and the colic baby. Also, I had some pretty bad anxiety that my child was going to die if I didn't have someone watching her while I slept, so I rarely slept, but he often slept more than 12 hours a day, which I thought was fine because he couldn't do much anyway, or at least I thought so at the time anyway. He isn't allowed to use any kind of physical discipline with her either. This took a lot of talking about to get him to understand that the Bible is bullcrap when it says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." I will not stand for biblical raising of our child. She will not be going to a church or be learning about religion unless she asks about it. I do not want her to be scared into religion. This is where his family and I have our issues. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm not upset with my wife anymore. I'm going to go give her a big hug and tell her how much I love her. He didn't tell me that I was proposed to a week after he secretly slept with his old girlfriend to determine which one of us he preferred, and he decided that I'd likely put up with his crap more than she would. It wasn't love, as I was assured, it was merely convenience for him. I found out the day we divorced 16 frustrated, uncomprehending years and 3 bewildered but patient children later. Oh, is that why you treated me like a second-class citizen after the first couple of years, and why you never paid attention to the kids despite them being the 3 most considerate, smart, good-looking, talented kids anyone could hope for? Is that why you spent any extra money you made on your expensive hobbies? Like sports cars, 5 motorcycles and motorcycle racing, target pistols and bullet-making gear, fly fishing gear and stuff that you swore was like investing and that we could always sell later at a profit. And yes, as you've probably worked out, that was grossly optimistic. You spent it on those things instead of clothes or shoes or, God forbid, college savings for the kids. Why, you screamed at them for walking between you and the TV while you were busy downing your 12 tall boys a night beers. Why, you never wanted to work for a company that could provide insurance for us because you wanted to only work for yourself because you, quote, didn't want to take orders, so I had to make sure my jobs provided our insurance and clothes and shoes and groceries and activities. Why, you spend more time, money, and attention on your friends than your supposed loved ones. Why, you moved us 900 miles away from my family on a whim, and then moved us 1,000 miles to live with your parents for a while when your whim didn't work out. Why, your parents provided you with a house, which you later trashed after the divorce, and then another because you needed a place to live and you didn't want to pay the rent the way the kids and I did, so you never paid your parents any rent or second mortgage payment, or offered a dime toward property taxes because they evidently owed you a goddamn living. I'm glad you married the woman you left us for now, since she's stuck with you, but you could have saved us all a lot of problems if you had just been honest in the first place, you F-wad. I'm sorry for the rant, everyone, but I feel better now. Thanks for giving me a place to do so. She never told me that she was ace. It's taken me years to piece it together, but doing the deed was always the thing we fought over. She constantly made the excuses for why she didn't want to. We've been married for 10 years and we're in our early 30s. I have fibromyalgia and I'm unable to work, and she has an anxiety disorder. We're high school sweethearts, and through a lot of bad times and intimate living conditions, our communication has gotten better. I actually approached the topic with her last week and she was hesitant at first. After understanding what heteroromantic asexualism meant, she has a much better understanding of herself. He liked to do the deed with other men. I married a man I'd been dating for 3 months because on our second date he broke down and confided in me that he was dying of terminal leukemia. He said he wanted to make the most of his remaining months and marry me. Being 23 and dumb, I believed him without asking for any proof and said yes. My family all rallied behind me, believing him to be a dying man, and threw us an incredible wedding even though they barely knew the guy. He refused treatment, playing the "I want to die with dignity" card, and finally, after 4 months of marriage and no decline in his health, I confronted him. It was a lie, an elaborate lie. My husband is a sociopath and a pathological liar. I wish I'd known that. Alright, teachers, how did a substitute teacher wreck your class while you were gone? Okay, so when I was a substitute, I got a lot of requested jobs because the substitute pool was so poor. One such example given to me was a substitute who would just go to sleep. I barely believed it. Once I was teaching full-time, I had a sub come in for a day, and when I got back, my students told me that he told them to leave him alone, sat down, and went straight to sleep. And it's at that moment that I believed how poor the pool was. When I was in high school, I had a sub do this. We all left early except for a few kids. One of the kids told us later that when the sub woke up, he noticed that all the kids had left, looked at the remaining kids and asked them why they hadn't left yet. Great times. I was a teacher's assistant while in college. The teacher and I took a week-long workshop and had a sub. The worst thing she did was not letting the kids go potty. It was in kindergarten and she said all of the kids going to the bathroom were interrupting the class. So one girl peed herself. The school policy was that if kids under a certain age had an accident, the nurse would give them a pull-up, basically a diaper to wear. The substitute proceeded to make fun of the girl for wearing a diaper and calling her a baby and such. The little girl ended up facing repercussions at home too. It was devastating to hear about. I came back, after being gone 1 day, mind you, and my students told me the sub had flipped over tables in rage and was escorted from the building by a cop. So some of this was just student gossip, but what actually happened is that the sub left the room to take a 20-minute phone call and the kids thought it would be funny to flip the tables over. The substitute then had to flip the tables right side up while yelling at the kids. No arrests at this point. Then, during lunch, my special ed co-teacher came into my room to set up and caught the sub making out with a girl. Turns out she was 18 to his 25, and the 20-minute phone call from earlier was to set up this little lunch rendezvous. The principal then had him escorted from the building by the resource officer. This is why I say having a sub is more work than just coming into school my damn self. That sub gave out snacks that I bought with my own money that I kept for the kids who stayed after to get tutoring. They threw out a broken electric pencil sharpener that the kids broke in front of her, which, again, I bought with my own money and couldn't get replaced by the company because I had no product to send back. I still don't have a sharpener in my room after that. They let the kids go through the things in my cabinets and desks. I lost a bunch of stuff that way. Okay, I'd always kind of grouped substitute and real teachers together in the respect I placed on them, but I guess that subs have this reputation. For the record, I'm certain there are many very dedicated and passionate subs out there as well. Didn't stop us from making their lives hell when I was in school. They asked a deaf kid to take off his hearing aids. The kid tried to tell her that he needs them to hear, but to her, they look like headphones. The same teacher cried when she was confronted by another teacher. She accused a student of stealing something that the aide had put away. This was a class that contained some pretty rough students, including one suspended multiple times for fighting and some gang members. So naturally, the sub decided to go after a sweet petite girl who had never caused trouble and was generally popular with her classmates. This set off the entire class, which is when the sub went ballistic and started throwing wild accusations and yelling at said students. Security eventually got called and took several students out. My first clue was when the sub got my cell phone number from the staff directory and went off for 20 or more minutes about how bad my students had been. This was followed up with an extremely long email and a 2-page written note on my desk, plus a concerned note from the admin about not having appropriate sub plans. She didn't follow them in the first place and decided to throw me under the bus. The next morning when I arrived at school, the students were waiting for me at the door. Once I got them calmed down enough to tell their side of the story, we had a discussion on how they could have handled the situation differently. I promised them to never get that sub again. On a related note, I had a good relationship with the said rough children because I treated them with respect and fairness. They usually behaved for me. As a side note, it's insane how easy it is to get even the most crazy of individuals like a normal human if you just treat them with a bit of decency and respect. I was homeless for a while, but I had this sort of immunity to getting targeted by bullies because 1, I was friends with everyone, and 2, if I had something, I shared it. So there was no point in wondering if I was hiding something, because I really wasn't. They left my perfectly prepped and neat desk in an absolute disaster. They didn't follow the lesson plan, and they took my gel pens. I had a sub steal my dry erase markers and emergency chocolate once. After that, I locked my drawers and left them with 2 pens and 1 dry erase marker. Today I learned how many people don't know what emergency chocolate is. It can be for you, your work friends, or in my case, occasionally also for students who are having a tough day and might be cheered up a little by some chocolate. It builds goodwill. Go and get yourself some. Make sure it's the good stuff. The mixed bag of individually wrapped Ghirardelli squares is my recommendation. It's a small portion, and just one of those feels like a treat. This happened to my colleague, but I was in the classroom next door. My colleague was showing Clash of the Titans at the end of the year, after a unit on ancient Greece. There's mild skin exposure at the beginning and the end of the movie as well, but they were in the middle of the movie, so there shouldn't have been an issue, right? Well, he left the video paused at the right spot. We still had VCRs like 10 years ago when this happened, but the sub somehow managed to show both the undressed individuals at the beginning and the end of the movie. Those scenes were hours apart, and the class was only 40 minutes. Then the sub wrote an email to the principal about how my colleague made him show those scenes. I actually had a similar incident with a sub and the Clash of the Titans movie, though I was a student at the time. Apparently, our substitute didn't know that there would be tasteful skin exposure in the film. So, when the undressed from the waist-up woman feeding her child popped up on screen, she sprinted to the front of the classroom to try and physically cover the TV with her body. Classic Catholic school. Didn't do anything to the kids per se, but told them that the reason I was out was because my mum was having chest cancer surgery. I teach K5, and I specifically didn't tell the kids because I didn't want them to worry. So when I came back, I had a bunch of kids coming up to me asking about my mum, which was so sweet, but not something that kindergarteners should have had to worry about. They rearranged my room, not in a moved a student A away from student B and put her by student C way, in a move the giant rug over to the opposite corner of the room and completely change the layout of the student desks and rearrange a bookshelf way. They lost more than half of my textbooks that I'd purchased myself, as well as textbooks that were school property. Administration just shrugged at this, until they found out the textbooks belonging to the school were around $120 each. They also lost all of the book assignments of 4 classes I asked them to collect so that I could correct those at home. It kinda sucked for the students who did put in a lot of work on them and didn't have digital copies. Also didn't teach anything that I asked him to because he didn't really like the subject matter. Also didn't bother grading. When I checked the grades he'd given out, there was only 1 grade and everyone was given 8 out of 10, even the students that weren't present in class. How do you manage to lose a bunch of textbooks from a classroom? I think you mean more like left with them in his bag. I've known a guy to do this as a substitute. He bragged about it on Facebook that he left with 30 textbooks that would have cost him £65 each. I reminded him while CCing in the school and the local police that what he did was theft, and he's no longer a teacher. She let the kids run wild and do whatever they wanted. They were first graders. I was out because my dad had died. Thank God my team realized what had happened, and everyone pulled together and cleaned the room and put it back together before I returned to work. The sub made the handicapped kid who has muscle, joint, and vision complications go grab his textbook from his homeroom. He's not completely helpless, but when it comes to heavy things, he does need help. His homeroom was halfway across campus, and the required book consisted of 5 large text volumes because they're specifically made for his poor vision. He can't wear glasses either due to complications. One of the kids offered to help because they're usually the one that goes and grabs it for him during normal class, but the sub yelled at him, saying he knows they're kind, and thought that they were just trying to get out of class. The sub told the kid he's not there to play games and for the kid to quit it before he sends him off to the principal's office. Needless to say, the entire class was shocked. Classmate came back with another student from the homeroom requesting that next time the sub send someone else to grab the books because my classmate can't carry it by himself. When my usual teacher came back, we requested the sub not return because of what he said to us and did to that classmate. My teacher wrote an email to the principal about it, and that was the end of that. Well, in fairness to this admittedly pretty crazy sub, making up false duties and stating non-existent reasons to leave class are something that a lot of students do when they have a substitute. But yeah, they could have maybe checked around a bit to find out more, and their threats were way over the top. I'll also mention that we've exhausted most of the answers that we've had from actual teachers, so there will be a lot of student witness accounts going forward. In 9th grade, my Algebra 1 teacher had her baby early in the year, so she was gone till the last month or 2 of the school year. The sub was a former teacher, so you'd think she'd be a great sub. Nope. She hyper-focused on 3 or 4 out of the 28 students in class and just taught them while completely ignoring the rest of us. She'd pass out a worksheet, then go to her chosen few, and never acknowledged us again until she dismissed us. Never checked homework, never even acknowledged us. If anyone outside of her favorite students raised their hands or spoke up, they were ignored. which went about as well as you'd expect with a bunch of 14 or 15-year-olds. That class was just wild. The kids who actually stayed in the classroom anyway. It was the Wild West in there. I'm actually surprised we weren't reported or visited by teachers on the other side of us for how loud we were. After several months with this lady, the vice principal was walking around, randomly checking classrooms, and walked into our absolute crap show Algebra 1 class. He lost it. He yelled at us all to sit down and shut up, which she also didn't acknowledge, by the way. He demanded she leave and sat with us the rest of the period. We never saw her again and had maybe 6 or 7 different subs after her. 2 weeks after this, our regular teacher came back, and when she realized we'd learned nothing and the extent of how useless this lady had been, she started tearing up. I passed the classroom on the way to the bathroom during the next period, and I saw her sobbing at her desk. A friend of my mum's worked at the central office where they assigned or organized the substitute teachers, and that lady was permanently taken off the sub list. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We had a substitute teacher in my high school French class show a movie that was straight-up softcore pornography, but tried to explain that since it was French, it was artistic. It was equally frustrating because while I wanted to see undressed women, I also couldn't stop reading the subtitles because I had to understand what they were saying. That teacher did not come back the next day. Every time my 8th grade history teacher was out, Mrs. Hostess would usually sub for him. Not sure why, because she subbed other classes too. But all of the incidents of note happened when she subbed for history. One, there happened to be a girl in the class who shared a name with an Irish folk song, and every time Mrs. Hostess took attendance, when she got to folk song girl, she sang the whole song. The whole thing. Every time. And 2, the history teacher kept candy and snacks in his desk. Lollipops that he'd hand out for correct answers or just because some leftover Halloween candy. And then there was the Twinkie. The Twinkie was not an ordinary Twinkie. That Twinkie was an experiment in processed food. This Twinkie was still in its original individual packaging and looked normal at first glance, but it was actually 3 years past expiration and rock solid. The history teacher demonstrated this by standing on said Twinkie during one of the first weeks of classes. All said to say, this is a thoroughly inedible Twinkie. It could be used in construction. So Mrs. Hostess subbed again, and we knew that she had discovered the lollipop stash because she was just openly eating them during class. But it wasn't until the next day that our history teacher opened his desk drawer to find out that the Twinkie was gone. This woman ate an expired, solid Twinkie as well as literally all the food and candy in the teacher's desk. Ugh. When I was back in the 4th grade, our teacher had a baby and was gone several weeks. The sub we had was an absolute witch. She had no patience for children, she'd yell at us for stupid stuff, ask us questions or give us homework that was way above our tiny little 4th grade brains, and then complain and call us stupid when literally none of the kids did well on said work. One girl decided to get smart with her one day, and the lady walks over and slaps the girl hard across the face, which of course sends the girl into a hysterical sobbing fit and says, "That's what your working girl of a mother should be doing more often." Being tiny, adorable 4th graders, we were all too afraid to tell anyone. We had to deal with that for 3 more weeks until the main teacher came back. I don't think kids these days would be silent about this. Back when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, we knew our parents would assume we were lying or deserved it and side with the teachers. But these days there's a much stronger culture of kids knowing their rights and that adults can't touch them. A few of the periods I taught were co-teach classes where a percentage of the students in the class had special needs, but could work well enough in the general population classroom with assistance from a special education co-instructor. These classes were often very rewarding to teach, but one downside of teaching that population from a logistical standpoint is that I was often required to attend ARD meetings. Basically, every special ed student has a meeting about twice a year, sometimes more frequently depending on need, where administrators, teachers, counselors, parents and guardians, and the student themselves all get together to go over their status and review the various educational accommodations the student is receiving to determine what may or may not need to change to best suit their needs. I didn't have a problem with attending these meetings per se, but because they only take one period, and several teachers are rotating through various meetings over the course of the day, the school had devoted ARD subs who were more akin to babysitters than actual substitute educators. That means that during one period, heck can randomly break loose. One year, I had a tough student who had some serious attitude problems, but was a good person underneath it all, and with whom I'd done a lot of work to improve her engagement and interest in my class. About halfway through the year, I got called for an ARD meeting during a period I had with said student. In my absence of 45 minutes, the sub decided to pick a petty argument with my kid, who was rightfully offended but unwisely overreacted and escalated things to making threats and nearly coming to blows with the sub to where she ended up with in-school suspension for a while. Getting the story from all parties and witnesses involved later, it's pretty clear the sub was to blame, and the kid who I'd worked so hard with was back at square one. I eventually got her back on track, and she ended up with one of the highest grades in my class at the end of the year, but I could only imagine how much better she could have been without the setback and the amount of lost trust she had in adults. Back when I was a student, I had a sub decide my plans weren't good enough for her and went rogue. She decided to show my students videos of animals giving birth on YouTube. I taught English. On the one hand, that is truly screwed up. I think the only time that would be tangentially useful would be in a higher education veterinarian class of some sort, right? But on the other hand, I really want to hear the justification this lady gave when she was questioned about her educational decisions. Well, I'm a little late to the party, but here goes. I had a grade 1/2 class last year, and one student had diabetes. Let's call him Adam. So Adam had a cell phone that beeps when his blood sugar is too low or too high. It's connected to the monitor in his arm or hip. The cell phone has no other uses, no apps, no data. It's not connected to the school Wi-Fi. The substitute, of course, saw his phone on his desk and promptly took it away as per the no devices rule. During gym class, an educational assistant, or EA, comes in to make sure everything is okay, and Adam is visibly ill. Pale and sweating, the whole works. Luckily, this EA knows Adam's medical plan and instantly asks Adam for the phone, and he explains that the sub took it away in the morning. The EA then loses it on the substitute, demanding the phone. The substitute calls in the principal to reprimand the EA and then gets reprimanded herself, as obviously she didn't read the student's safety plans. She was asked to leave, and the principal taught the class the rest of the day. Adam was fine, drank a couple of juice boxes and had a granola bar. His mum picked him up shortly after. Two things come to mind. There was the one who told the black children they need to speak more clearly because people think black people are hard to understand. Then there was the one just sitting and playing on their phone while the class lost its mind. I'd left out eggs overnight that I was going to use in a science experiment the following day. I was out and thought nothing about it. I returned the following day and went looking for the eggs, only to find them missing. I asked a student where they'd gone, and I was informed that the substitute took the class to the special education kitchen, hard-boiled them, and then ate them. I went to talk to my AP and was informed that the sub had called in sick for her job for that day due to food poisoning. I had a cool Chinese lucky cat that went missing after I had a sub. My students said the sub seemed really intrigued by it, talked about it several times, and even moved it from the shelf where it sat and brought it over to my desk. And it was gone when I returned the next day. I had a sub who somehow allowed a last period class of freshmen to convince them that they weren't supposed to be working on the packet that I left for class, and which every other class that day had been working on. Reason given was because they had, quote, already finished it, and told him they were supposed to be watching a movie. So he went to the library to get the movie, leaving the class unattended, which promptly then broke out into a dance party involving dancing on the desks. My department's chair classroom was next door, but as she taught AP government to seniors, she was able to leave them to come next door and try to figure out what the heck that noise was. No sub in the room. She calmed the class down and got them back into the seats and into the worksheets, called the principal, who met the sub on his way back from the library, and told him he could go home. My chair also found it would be appropriate to basically call me and blame me for this while I was sick at home. I don't teach anymore. I mean, packets weren't a great emergency sub-plan, but what can you do? They could have played Heads Up 7-Up for all I cared. They were a handful of a group on the best of days. Freshmen after lunch during last period of the day are a situation. I vividly remember one incident of having a substitute in my kindergarten. I had an infected cut on my toe and had been prescribed an antibiotic. That morning was the first time I took it. We were sitting on the floor for roll call, and I remember this burning pain in my abdomen, and she told us to get up and go out to our desks. I tried to get up only to realize I couldn't move and just laid back. The sub was a total cow, and I remember she was always really mean. Anyway, she starts yelling at me for being attention-seeking and basically tries to pull me up. I'm in so much pain that I start screaming, and one of the teachers from the classroom next to ours comes, realizes I'm definitely not faking it, and calls an ambulance. Long story short, I'm horribly allergic to penicillin and my kidneys were failing. I was in hospital for almost a week before I got discharged. Needless to say, that absolute witch was not allowed back at the school, but I'll never forget that day. We had a sub for our science class. She didn't believe in science, but pseudosciences instead, and was sexist to males. Because of her weird diet, she'd rip loud, sulfur-smelling toots all the time. Then she'd get mad if we brought it up, despite being fed New Age hippie bullcrap and being crop-dusted. She was also a horrible life skills teacher because she said women can choose when to have periods without birth control. I participate in STEM programs a lot. In the 90s, I belonged to a club that refurbished old industrial PCs and donated them to schools. Sometimes we'd get completely burned out motherboards or disk drives, so I took a bunch of those and made displays showing the insides of computers, and I'd let the kids explore them as part of my session. Then I'd dig out a couple of blown PCs and monitors, hand out the screwdrivers and let them rip them apart. Yes, I was always careful around the old tube monitors. Once they were done, I'd let them pick apart if they wanted to take it home. The younger kids especially loved this, and frequently I'd see some kids take home a hard drive controller or a graphics card like it was a real treasure. I even made the local news with my program. That's the thing about living in a small city. Eventually everyone makes the news. So one day I went to do my lesson at a high school, I think freshman or sophomore science class, and the class had a substitute and I had an appointment right after that session. So I told them I'd come back to pick up everything the next day. The kids could take whatever they wanted from the old PCs, but please put my displays aside in the cupboard. Next day I came by and all of my displays were still out and they were completely trashed. Worse yet, the sub's attitude was, well, kids will be kids. That was the last session I did ever for that program. What's the most bullcrap-sounding alibi a cop got that actually turned out to be true? Cop here got a call of a domestic dispute that sounded very heated and a lot of banging was heard. Get to the scene and I can hear someone yelling and swearing and brawling. It does not sound good at all. Guy answers the door, shirt off and angry, but seems bewildered as to why the police have been called. He told me he was building IKEA furniture. That sounded like the most bullcrap thing ever. But we enter and see that there's new IKEA furniture half set up and no one else is home. Color me surprised. And no, I didn't help assemble the furniture. No one should assemble IKEA stuff while armed. I was driving with my fiancé and we went through a roadblock where they checked registration and oh crap. We get to the cops and they ask for ours. I'm sitting in the passenger seat. I open up the glove box and right there is a clear, unmarked baggie filled to the brim with catnip. I completely forgot that it was there and I just froze. Wide-eyed, I turned to look at the cop shining his light through my open window, and he's frozen too, just staring at this baggie with this look on his face like, really? I just started immediately professing, oh my god, I swear to god this is catnip, you can take it and smell it or test it or whatever, like I swear. And at this point it's just so ridiculous that I start cracking up. And the cop takes it and reasonably deduces that I'm telling the truth, and he starts laughing and calls his partner over and tells her what happened, and they both just cackled away for a minute and sent us on our way. During a search of a person, I pulled out a bag of sticky dark substance consistent with smack. The subject had multiple substance priors and is a known heavy smack user. He immediately tells us it's burnt sugar and he's angry someone sold it to him. Long story short, when I tested the substance, it did not test positive. Former Maliciouscompliance here, look it up, it's a Dutch thing. Police, but also kinda military. We also had jurisdiction over the American soldiers stationed here. One day we got called over to a possible domestic dispute. We arrived at the house and the guy opened wearing only underwear. He told us he and his wife were role-playing. Of course, we didn't trust this and we asked to see his wife. After denying us entry, we told him we'd come back with a warrant. He reluctantly agreed to let us enter. So we go in and he opened the basement door and inside was the freakiest dungeon, man. I mean chains, whip things I couldn't identify hanging on the walls, and then in the middle, hanging in the chains, was his undressed, prepared wife. We asked her, but she told us everything was okay. It turned out they were really into some stuff. Asked them to keep the screaming part in the basement and to a minimal. We did the whole thing with a straight face, but man, as soon as we were in the car… This cannot be the only time this has happened. I'm willing to stake my savings account on it. It's probably not even the only account of it in this video, although that I won't bet money on. I got pulled over for driving to school at 10 a.m. The cop wanted to know why I was skipping school. I explained that our little town girls basketball team just won state, and since the game was so far away, they'd let us start that day at 10:30 a.m. He followed me all the way to the school so he could ask the principal. I still don't know what was illegal about driving to school at 10 a.m., but he was kind of a D-bag. You know what? I'll throw my hat into the ring as a defense attorney. A guy got pulled over for impaired driving and got charged later with a DUI. My boss gets the criminal complaint, and the guy shows up for his initial appearance and tells her he hadn't been drinking despite horrifically failing the sobriety test. The last part of that test is a breathalyzer, which he refused. Refusal is an automatic failure in and of itself, without failing the nystagmus or follow the finger test, the walk, the leg lift. My boss is literally sitting next to him, and he's obviously wasted again, disappointing but not uncommon for alcoholics. The deputies arrest him for bail jumping because he drove himself to court that day, and while out on bail he's not supposed to drink. He adamantly denies drinking. The blood tests come back. He didn't drink. The guy's diabetic without knowing it, and naturally got himself drunk because sometimes when it goes untreated, diabetes can cause symptoms that look just like intoxication. We got him some insulin and the charge is dismissed. Okay, so I'm going to tell my story as the person behind the wheel. My uncle was divorcing his terrible wife. He was no saint himself, but definitely on the right side of their divorce. The wife was still on the paperwork to take their 2 kids out of the school, even though my uncle had temporary custody while the courts did their thing. She had previously threatened to take them both and just run away, so I don't know why she was still on the paperwork. On picture day that year, she showed up to the school and signed both of the kids out and disappeared. I was not involved in the crazy process of calling the cops and tracking the kids down, but I was pulled from school that day because I had my driver's license and could be an extra pair of hands. They managed to find the kids and they were turned over to my grandmother and mum, but my cousin was distraught that she'd be missing picture day. It was her first time away from her terrible mother, and she was finally allowed to be a cheerleader, which was a dream in her tiny eyes. So, me having my car and nothing else better to do, I offered to take her back to the school. My mum got the school to agree and to keep the person there a little longer, but it was going to be by the skin of our teeth that we'd make it, as this was rural Oklahoma. We got in the car and I blasted down those dirt roads doing approximately 70 in a 35 zone. Not a good decision on my part, but I was an anxiety-ridden 17-year-old dealing with nasty divorce and kidnapping for the first time in my life. We, of course, get pulled over. I'm freaking out because I can't afford that bad of a ticket, not to mention all the other crap happening in my life that day. The cop listened to the story and ignored my barely held-in tears and said he'd let us off with a warning because he believed the story. And the only reason he believed the story was that he'd just pulled over my uncle going the same speed in the opposite direction on the same road and got the same story from him. I heard a wild alibi told to a cop in my capacity as an EMS. Go to a woman who's been attacked by her cat. Her injuries were crazy. Covered in blood, her scalp is literally shredded, huge lacerations and stuff, and I know cats are known to do some damage, but the story just wasn't fitting and she was so sketchy about anyone going in her house. Adamantly refuses to let anyone inside because she thinks they're going to take away her cat. He didn't mean to, he was just excited by the birds. Her cat was a lynx. Oh, I was the one with the excuse. I forgot my keys at a friend's place before going out drinking that night. Got home at 2 a.m, there are no keys. Only one of our windows didn't have ghetto bars, so I took the screen out and started pushing and smacking it up. The locks were on the sides, only providing friction. As I'm halfway in, I just feel whoomp. I got tackled into the house, and the officer was still outside, holding onto my ankles. I look up and just say, "I'm astonished by your response time. I actually live here. Let me get up, unlock the door, and give you my ID." So I did. He stares at it for a second, then says, "Sorry," and sprints off to look for the person they were actually in the area looking for. My dad is an officer, and he pulled over a woman for speeding and running a red light, and she said her chest implant burst. He called EMS to rush them to the hospital, and turned out it did. It's actually very dangerous if they leak. Family friend was a cop. Pulled a guy over who was speeding profusely. The guy was obviously disheveled. He said he was headed to the hospital because he had a tick on his member. The cop was confused, but he escorted him there, then waited in the lobby to check on him and see if he was blowing smoke. After a while, he asked the desk what was going on and why it took so long to take a tick off a man's eggplant. Her reply was, "It wasn't on it, it was in it." My dad was a cop, and my favorite story of his goes like this. He's a young cop in a rough neighborhood. It's so late that the stoplights are flashing red, meaning to treat it like a stop sign. Out of nowhere, this pink caddy goes rolling through the intersection. My dad pulls him over. A big black guy was driving. The caddy had a fur interior and dice in the mirror. A real pimp car, if you know what I mean. My dad goes, "Sir, do you know you ran that light back there?" And the guy says, "Officer, I do believe I got between the flashes." My dad was laughing so hard he had to let the guy go. I had a run-in with a cop that was really funny once. When I was 18, I was on a double date with a friend, and we stepped out of a restaurant to smoke. A cop came up and started hounding us, telling us that there had been break-ins into cars in the area. Eventually, he said he needed to pat us down, and he pulled a brown paper bag out of my friend's pocket. He got a smug look on his face and asked, "So, what's in here, huh?" And my friend said, "The Emancipation Proclamation," with a completely straight face. The cop opened the bag and pulled out a small booklet, got embarrassed, and let us go. My friend had been to the Lincoln Museum earlier that day and did actually have a small copy of the Emancipation Proclamation in his pocket. Former cop here, I was behind a vehicle that couldn't stay in the lane and kept swerving and stuff. It was 1 a.m. and I think there was another drunk idiot on the road. I pull him over, the guy is a straight-up butthole to me. Cursed me out, yelling at me, and I noticed his speech is kinda slurred. I get him out to the car, and I can smell a fruity smell on his breath, and he has to lean against the car for support. I ask him how much he's had to drink, and he tells me to F off. By this point, I'm ready to bring him in for a DUI. But I just had a feeling something wasn't right. I called emergency medical services to come and check him. Blood sugar was at 40. Not drunk, just diabetic. If I would have arrested him, he probably would have died before I finished the paperwork. Go with your gut if something doesn't seem right. Huh. If I had a nickel for every time I'd heard of a DUI being diabetic and not drunk, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it is weird that it happened twice. In high school, some of my buddies sold green herb, driving around in a car with a scale, baggies, and 2 to 4 ounces at any given time. One day, Tony and Eric decided to go to a really good taco stand for lunch in between deliveries. Eric is driving, they're making their way downtown when he starts laughing. He says, "Did you see that?" Tony says, "No, what?" "I'll turn around, you've got to see this." "Dude, don't get us pulled over, what the frick, chill." Eric makes a U-turn and turns down a street. Nothing there, so he stops in front of a random house to look around. Tony is perplexed. What the frick was it? Just drive. I saw a dude pushing a stroller with 2 wiener dogs in it. Tony says, "You're retarded." As soon as Eric starts driving again, a cop car pulls up behind them and lights them up. He walks up to the door. "What are you guys doing?" Eric is panicking a bit and says, "I saw a guy pushing a stroller with wiener dogs in it and I had to show my friend." "How come you're parked in front of this known trap house and your car smells like dope?" Silence from Tony, and Eric says, "There was this guy with a stroller." "Get out of the car," says the cop. The car gets searched and they find all of this crap. As they're getting loaded into the back of the cop car, all handcuffed up, Cop 2 just stops. "Hey, look at that." The other cop, "Oh, wow, no crap." Everyone looks at this old guy pushing a stroller with his 2 wiener dogs poking their heads out. The cops burst out laughing. They both got charged with possession and trafficking, though. And since I've never met anyone who didn't love this story about Eric, here's another one for ya. A while before the infamous wiener dog incident, he had to get new tires for his car. Bought it into a local tire shop and left it there for the day. Being the brilliant kid that he was, he left his stash in his favorite hiding spot, thinking that nobody would ever find it. The hiding spot was in his spare tire compartment, under the carpet in the hatchback and trunk area. The guy changing his tires was courteous enough to make sure his spare had the manufacturer-recommended amount of air pressure in it. He also helped himself to an ounce of high-quality bud while he was in there. Eric was angry. He told us about it while we were blazing that night. We all laughed, we thought it was great. He didn't. He strutted into that tire shop the next day and demanded to speak with the manager. He told him that his employee stole something from the back of his car and he wanted it back. When he refused to tell the manager what was stolen, the manager basically told him he couldn't do anything if he didn't know what it was and suggested he call the cops if he wanted to escalate things. Eric did not call the cops. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a run-in with the Fuzz a few years ago, and I wonder exactly what they thought when they first stopped me. I'd taken a cab back from a work party, and I was pretty drunk. My friend and I had just moved to this new apartment, so I accidentally gave the cab driver the wrong address. I ended up on a block that looked very similar to mine and a building that looked like mine. There were 2 doors before getting into my apartment door, which was on the first floor. Like my apartment building, they left the first door unlocked and locked the second door. I kept trying my keys to open it, but I couldn't and I was confused. I went outside to look for my car and it wasn't parked there. That's when I realized I was on the wrong block. I started walking in the direction I thought my apartment was when a cop car pulls up. They ask me what I'm doing and I tell them, "I'm really drunk and I just want to go home," which was the honest truth. They told me they got a call about someone trying to get into an apartment building. I guess the people in that building woke up and thought I was trying to break in. They were super suspicious of me at first, but eventually it became clear I was just some drunk idiot and not a burglar. They ran me through to make sure I didn't have any warrants or anything, and when I checked out, they offered me a ride home. The ride back was hilarious because when we were getting to my apartment, I tried telling them that it was a bit complicated to get to because of all the one-way streets. The officer driving was like, "Who do you think you're with?" and then turned on the lights and went the wrong way down the street to get me home fast. It honestly felt like I was with the 2 cops from Superbad. My 4th grade teacher went to a cousin's wedding in mid-July. The cousin had overestimated how much champagne they'd need at the reception and was giving away bottles to anyone who was interested. So my teacher took 3 and put them in the backseat of her car. Again, this was in a hot summer day in July. After saying their goodbyes, my teacher, her husband, and her parent piled into the car and pulled out onto the highway, where 2 of the bottles burst open, spraying champagne everywhere and causing quite a ruckus. Of course, while this was happening, the car was swerving as the driver was also getting bathed in sparkling champagne. So it came as no surprise that as soon as they collected themselves, they saw the familiar flashing lights of a state trooper and pulled over. According to my teacher, the first thing the cop said was, "I'm not going to ask if you've been drinking because I can smell it from here." My teacher tried explaining what had happened, but the cop wouldn't hear of it and ordered everybody out of the car. That's when the cops saw that everyone, both drivers and passengers, were dressed in their finery, but soaked with champagne and looking quite shaken. A cursory search showed the open bottles, but the cop still insisted on a quick sobriety test just to make sure. I kinda have to wonder if the alcoholic fumes no doubt pouring off all of the drenched people would have affected the results of a breathalyzer test, but then again it seems like there was a fair body of visual proof, so maybe he'd give you the benefit of the doubt. My first ever real call was for a flasher at the local park. When I got there and finally found him, it was a mentally impaired young man, aged 16 or 17, who had a pair of headphones on going full Donald Duck. I said, "Hey man, come here. What the hell is going on? You know you have to keep your pants on, especially at the park." He goes on to tell me he had a bad itching down his pants and couldn't take it anymore, so he had to rip them off and was running home to get help. I said, "Come on, you couldn't make it home first?" And he said no, he had ants in his pants. As sure as crap, according to more than one witness's account, he had been sitting in a sandbox playing at the park and accidentally on a nest of red ants that had crawled up his trouser legs. I'm not a cop, but once I got pulled over by a fire truck. It was Orlando in August 1990. It was close to 100 degrees outside. I worked for a computer rental company. We'd rent computers to companies in town for trade shows, or for a lot of other situations. The company van was a ragged-out Chrysler minivan with 180,000 miles on it. The AC didn't work, so the windows were down. I was coming back to the office in heavy rush-hour traffic, and I found myself in a right-turn-only lane and couldn't get out in time. So, I was forced to make the right turn. I hit the gas to speed up and get in front of the people making a left turn into my same direction. I had to get all the way over to the left side to make a U-turn. So I cut off a fire truck to do it. One of the big squarish fire trucks with the flat front. I cut them off and got in the left lane to wait for the green arrow. I looked out the window to my left and saw a Dixie chopper lawnmower mowing the grass on the side of the road maybe 15 feet from me. It was already hot, but this tremendous wave of heat came through the driver's side window. I thought, man, that's a hot lawnmower. The light turned green and I started my U-turn. Halfway through it, this cloud of, I thought, steam came out of the hood and covered the windshield so I couldn't see. The power steering also failed. So I fought the car, trying to get back to the gas station at the corner so I could find a payphone. And yes, that is how old I am. Because I couldn't see, I missed the turn and ended up turning into an apartment complex. About this time, the cloud stopped and I could see again. Still no power steering. So I fought the car to do a U-turn so I could get back to the gas station. At this point, the fire truck I'd cut off turned into the apartment complex, full lights, and blocked me in. 2 huge firefighters got out of the truck holding fire extinguishers like beer cans. "Excuse me, sir, did you know your van was on fire?" Turns out, while I was cutting them off, I'd been shooting flames out from under the passenger side of the van. They hit the lights, did a U-turn, and came back to me. The wave of heat wasn't from the lawnmower. They checked out the van and let me go. The cause turned out to be a damaged power steering line. It sprayed power steering fluid all over the exhaust manifold and caught fire. In short, cut off a fire truck while on fire. Got pulled over by said fire truck. Former park ranger. First week of the job, we pulled up and saw a couple of kids smoking in their cars with the windows down. The city has ordinance against smoking on park property, but it's too petty to just give them a ticket. We approach the car and they're visibly nervous. My field training officer, or FTO, looks through the windows and sees a couple of beer cans in the car. Bingo. We get them out and start running their info. They're all underage, but old enough to smoke cigs. My FTO asks them where the beer came from, and the driver says he recycles. FTO laughs and begins to search the car. I'm finishing up running their info, and these guys are being really respectful. The FTO finishes searching the cab and goes to open the trunk. All of a sudden, I hear him burst out laughing. He's laughing so hard that he can barely breathe. He waves me over to look at the trunk of the car, and it's level with crushed cans and bottles. My FTO said that it had heard that excuse for 20-year-olds before, and this was the first time it was true. He walked up, uncuffed the driver, and let him go. I did get stopped once for eating a taco. I worked at a community college in LA that had a high school right next to it. Well, there was a lot of substances sold through the fence at that high school, so there were always cops driving up and down the street between the schools. Couldn't get a parking pass since I just worked at that school, so I always parked on the street. I hit up Taco Bell for lunch and was sitting in my car eating my double-decker tacos when a cop car drove past. Next thing I know, he's flipping a U-turn and heading straight for me. He slides to a stop, driver window to driver window, and yells, "What the heck do you think you're doing?" Stunned, I just said, "Eating my lunch." Well, he isn't buying it and says I'm hiding something. I just hold up my taco and look so confused. He burst out laughing and peeled out. I saw him a few times after that, and he always waved and had the biggest grin on his face. I had a smack addict who I arrested for a warrant. While searching her purse, I found a small container with a grayish-brown substance in it, consistent with smack. When I asked her what it was, she started laughing. She told me to test it because it wasn't smack. I tested it, and sure enough, the test came back negative. She explained to me that inside the container were the ashes of her dead cat. She said that when she goes to pick up smack for her friends, she'll take some for herself and cut the rest with her cat's ashes. Her friends have been snorting or shooting up some of her dead cat. We got a call for a kid. He was 18 and a gang member. Apparently he was brandishing a firearm. He had pulled up his shirt pretending to brandish said weapon to intimidate somebody. The person calling only saw a holster. After we got there, he kept telling us it wasn't a gat but an adult toy. We took him down at weapon point and he was right. He was walking around with a holstered black marital aid. Why? Because he could. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.